Good morning, and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public meeting and public hearing for April 7th, 2026. We're going to begin by taking attendance, and I'm going to ask our legal counsel, Mark Silberman, to call the roll.
Vice Chair Master,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quembe, Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Mahan,
Here.
Commissioner Wilder.
This meeting is being held in our hearing room at 253 Broadway on the second floor. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube for anyone who would like to participate remotely. We're going to start with an agenda from the research department with 3 proposed designations that are here for a vote. Then we will move to our preservation agenda, where we will have our public meeting agenda for applications which have already had a public hearing, and then move to our public hearing agenda for new applications on our designated properties. Now I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Research, Margaret Herman.
Good morning. Item number 1 is LP 2696, Public School 15 Annex, 362 Schermerhorn Street, Brooklyn, Block 174, Lot 1201, formerly Lot 1 in part. The item proposed for designation is a 3-story Romanesque Revival school building designed by James Naughton and built in 1889, presenting as Sarah Eccles.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Eccles from the Research Department. The Public School 15 Annex represents a distinctive design by James Naughton, the prolific superintendent of public school buildings in Brooklyn in the last quarter of the 19th century. Set on a prominent corner at 3rd Avenue and Schermerhorn Street, the Annex, under continuous ownership of the Department of Education for nearly its entire lifespan, functioned as a place of education, opportunity, and independence for children, girls, adult women, and immigrants into the 21st century. At the public hearing on March 10th, 2026, 2 people testified in support of the proposed designation, including the owner and the Historic Districts Council. In addition, the Commission received 2 written submissions of support for the proposed designation from the New York Landmarks Conservancy and the Boerum Hill Association. The building is located on the southeast corner of Schermerhorn Street and 3rd Avenue. The landmark site is the tax lot. Commissioners, please note that the address of 362 Schermerhorn Street that this building was calendared under has been changed to 372 Schermerhorn Street to reflect the site's current street address. The architect James Naughton was an Irish immigrant who came here as a child in 1848. He held various city positions until he became the superintendent of schools for the Brooklyn Board of Ed. In this position, he constructed over 100 schools. The old school building of Public School 15 was constructed in 1859 on what was previously farmland. It sufficiently served as a local school until the 1880s when it became overcrowded. In 1889, the school was enlarged with the construction of the Annex, an improvement that made it, quote, one of the handsomest schools in the city. The Annex was set on a corner facing a bustling thoroughfare, abutting another building to the south, forcing Naughton onto a narrow and long lot unlike his other schools of the period. The narrow front facade still needed to convey the importance of a public school. Naughton articulated the elevation through varied materials and sculptural massing, employing projections and setbacks to create dimension, and emphasizing a central vertical element that lifts the composition upward. This motif would become later integral to his later work. In the mid-1920s, the population of downtown Brooklyn surrounding the school was primarily immigrants from Europe, including Lithuania, Italy, Poland, Ireland, and the Netherlands. The girls who attended the girls' continuation school reflected the neighborhood, with students and teachers that were mostly immigrants or the children of immigrants. Through census records, we see many of the girls went on to have careers in the courses they studied here. The girls' continuation school was part of a larger continuation school program, providing continuing education for children above the age of 14 who until 1919 had no right to education and often went straight into work in dangerous low-paying jobs. Continuation schools were regarded as the forefront of democracy in the school system, making education and opportunity the right of every child. The girls' school spoke specifically to challenges girls faced, including the expectation to care for the family and tend to the home. At the girls' continuation school, they learned practical skills such as homesick remedies, dressmaking, and household budgets, but were also given the opportunity to study bookkeeping, stenography, nursing, and other subjects where technical training was required. The girls' continuation school in the Annex was so successful, it opened a summer school for women, attracting college graduates, mothers, and grandmothers who needed an income during the Depression. One woman who attended the program highlighted the significance of the school. Quote, "Years ago, education was not considered essential for women. Today, it is vital." End quote. The adult school, housed in the Brooklyn Girls Continuation School, helped generations of women grow in knowledge, ability, and confidence. Later, in the 1930s, as the Depression continued, the school also became an evening vocational school for both men and women thanks to funding from the WPA. The evening school taught English to adult immigrants as well as vocational trades. The school continued to function until 1942. In the late 1930s, child labor laws tightened, the Depression left young people less opportunity to work, and the common occupation of teenagers became full-time school. This led to a dwindling population of students and eventually the continuation school's closure in 1942. Then the building became a Department of Education outpatient clinic for child psychology. This psychology center was used to integrate early forms of mental health services into schools. In the 1990s, it became home to a specialized business high school, continuing to teach young adults vocational skills. And in 2007, it became home to the Khalil Gibran International Academy, which opened as the first English-Arabic public school in the country that offered curriculum focusing on the Arabic language and culture. The school building is highly intact with only minor alterations, including the removal of roofline finials, windows altered in kind, and the entrance door replaced with the fireproof safety door, a typical alteration for a school building. More recently, the two southernmost bays seen in the tax photo on the left, likely a later addition to the school annex, were removed as part of the development project on the adjacent lots. The alterations do not detract from the ornamentation or its significance as an important public school. Constructed in 1889 to serve the needs of Brooklyn's growing population, the Public School 15 Annex reflects an important transitional moment in the work of Superintendent James Naughton, illustrating the evolution of his architectural approach to school design for which he would later become known. A place that served multiple functions over its lifetime, that provided education and independence for children, women, and immigrants, the building still reflects its history as a substantial site of opportunity. Because of its architectural and cultural significance, the Research Department recommends the Commission vote to designate the Public School 15 as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions or comments on this? Okay. So the PS 15 Annex in downtown Brooklyn, I think, is a standout 1889 school building that was later a pioneering institution in its role as a girls' continuing school. It extended educational opportunities to young women. Many of them were first and second generation Americans. So this well-preserved building is a unique design among James Naughton's school buildings and is a significant piece of New York City's public education history. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Just a comment. It seems this is a site and location near, I think, Alloy Block, which is a lot of high-rise going up. So protecting this school would be important in terms of this site as well, and having this historic fabric here. I think it's a great example, and it seems fully intact from its Romanesque revival style. It's a great example of the history of social reform and education in New York City. I think it's a very important building.
Thank you. Okay. So if everyone is comfortable, let's make a motion to designate this as an individual landmark. Commissioner Chu, would you like to read the motion? Okay. Oh, that's okay.
Okay. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate Public School 15 Annex, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York City individual landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation. As set forth in the designation report for LP 2696 dated April 7th, 2026, I also move that the Borough of Brooklyn Tax Map Block 174, Lot 1201, formerly Lot 1, in part, be designated as its landmark site, as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Thank you. Commissioner Ikumbe, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Kwembe,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you. So Public School 15 Annex is our newest individual landmark. Thank you so much, commissioners, for designating that. I'll turn it over to Margaret.
Item number 2 is LP 2694, the Church of St. Mary at 440 Grand Street, Manhattan, Block 341, Lot 26. The item proposed for designation is a church built in 1833 with a Romanesque revival facade designed by architect Patrick Charles Keeley in 1864. And presenting is Lisa Buckley.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Buckley from the Research Department. The Church of St. Mary is the home of Manhattan's third oldest Catholic parish, founded in 1826 to serve the rapidly growing Irish immigrant population of the Lower East Side, and today it remains an important center of Catholic immigrant life in the community. The building was completed in 1833, making it the second oldest existing Catholic church building in Manhattan. Originally adorned with a Greek revival facade, prolific architect of Catholic churches, Patrick Charles Keeley, was engaged to design its current Romanesque revival facade and flanking towers in 1864. On March 10, 2026, the Landmarks Preservation Commission held a public hearing on the proposed designation of the Church of St. Mary as a New York City individual landmark and the proposed designation of the related landmark site. The hearing was duly advertised in accordance with the provisions of the law. 11 people spoke in support of designation, including New York City Councilman Chris Marte, representatives of Community Board 3, the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, the Historic Districts Council, the Friends of the Lower East Side, the Koala Foundation, and 5 individuals. No one spoke in opposition. Additionally, written correspondence in support of the designation was received from the Municipal Art Society, the New York City Landmarks Conservancy, and 181 individuals. The church is located at 440 Grand Street between Clinton and Pitt Streets. The landmark site is the tax lot. Commissioners, please note that a very small sliver of the right tower is on the adjacent lot, which is a remnant of the former street that was demapped, indicated by the purple arrow. There are a few small structures and accretions attached to the Annex building and the western and northern edge of the landmark site that are non-contributing, including an enclosed breezeway connecting the rectory on an adjacent lot and a vaulted roof over a cellar. These are highlighted and indicated by the purple arrows. Since the colonial period, Irish immigrants to New York faced nativist and anti-Catholic discrimination and violence, including a prohibition of Catholic priests in the colony of New York that persisted beyond American independence. The repeal of this law in 1784 cleared the way for the open practice of Catholicism in New York State, and St. Peter's Catholic Church soon became the first parish in the city in 1786. St. Patrick's was to follow in 1815, and St. Mary's was the third parish, established in 1826. While the law changed, anti-Catholic and anti-Irish sentiment persisted much longer, leading to the destruction of the first dome of St. Mary's, a church on Sheriff Street that had been purchased from a Presbyterian congregation. In 1832, the parish commenced construction of the first purpose-built Roman Catholic church on Manhattan's Lower East Side. The parish held Mass in a leased building for a few months, and then in a temporary shelter in the basement of the new church prior to its completion in 1833. The church on Grand Street was built with fieldstone side facades and a monumental Greek Revival facade, a design likely based on architectural pattern books depicting popular styles of the day, but the designers and builders of the building are not known to us. The parish thrived, and in 1864, they engaged Irish-born architect Patrick Charles Keeley to expand the church's size and update its Greek Revival facade in the Romanesque Revival style. Its tripartite facade, dominated by double towers, is executed in red brick with handsome brownstone details. The image on the right shows St. Mary looking from the rear along the now gone Ridge Street. While the front facade was remade, its fieldstone side facades dating to the Greek Revival style original construction remain. Like the majority of the parish, Keeley was an immigrant from Ireland, arriving in 1842 and becoming an important and highly prolific designer and builder of Catholic churches in New York City and beyond. Despite having no formal architectural training beyond the training he received from his father, he went on to design nearly 600 churches in the northeastern United States and elsewhere over the course of his career, including nearly all the Catholic cathedrals in New England. Keeley's designs, such as the Bishop of Brooklyn's Parsonage and St. Anthony of Padua Church, are represented in several New York City historic districts. St. Mary's will be the first individual New York City landmark designed by Keeley. The church is a striking example of Romanesque Revival architecture utilizing the round arches that define the style. The stained glass windows around the facade are later additions dating to the late 19th century. The side facades are composed of fieldstone and date to the original 1833 construction. In 1871, the expansion of the church was again necessary due to overcrowding. Lawrence J. O'Connor designed a rear addition which required the demolition of most of the rectory situated behind the church. An annex adjacent to the west transept, pictured at right, is believed to be the remaining portion of the rectory and is adjoined by a later non-contributing enclosed breezeway and cellar. The blocks surrounding the church, once uniformly comprised of low-rise buildings, were changed dramatically over the course of the mid-20th century as smaller tenements and mixed-use structures gave way to high-rise residential buildings during the era of urban renewal. In the 1960s, St. Mary's partnered with the Department of Housing and Urban Development to establish the Grand Street Guild, an organization dedicated to building affordable housing in the neighborhood. One of these buildings was built just to the east of St. Mary's, resulting in the demapping of Ridge Street and the creation of a pedestrian path and community space pictured at right. In its early history, the Church of St. Mary was central to the lives of many of the earliest Catholics who came to New York from Ireland. It continues to be an important community institution to more recent Catholic immigrants, including the many from Spanish-speaking communities who make up the parish today. The Church of St. Mary embodies 2 centuries of the history and diversity of immigrants to the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Its primary facade is a rare example of Patrick Charles Keeley's Romanesque Revival style church design, and it retains its original early 19th century side facades. The second oldest existing Roman Catholic church building in Manhattan, it remains an important reminder of the neighborhood's early development history. The research department recommends that the Landmark Preservation Commission votes to designate the Church of St. Mary as an individual landmark.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions or any comments on this? Okay, so I'll say a couple things. The Church of St. Mary is the oldest Roman Catholic church building in Manhattan's Lower East Side, and it really embodies the history and diversity of immigration to the neighborhood and the city as a whole. It was built almost 200 years ago, 1832 to 33, and the church was central to the earliest Catholics who came to New York from Ireland. And it continues to be an important community institution today, serving immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries. With its original fieldstone sidewalls still visible, along with Patrick Charles Keeley's 1864 facade, the Church of St. Mary's reflects both the architectural and cultural history of the Lower East Side. I also want to note the tremendous community support that we had for this designation. We had close to 200 individual letters of support. Commissioners, any other final comments? Okay. So why don't we read the motion? Commissioner Mahan, would you like to read this motion?
It would be my pleasure. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Church of St. Mary, Borough of Manhattan, as a New York City individual landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in a designation report for LP-2694 dated April 7th, 2026. I also move that Borough of Manhattan Tax Map Block 341, Lot 26 be designated as its landmark site, as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for designating that. Yes. And the Church of St. Mary's at 440 Grand Street in Manhattan is our newest individual landmark. Yeah. Yeah. Congratulations. I'll turn it over to Margaret for the next item.
Item number 3 is LP 2695, the Lithuanian Alliance Building, 307 West 30th Street in Manhattan, Block 754, Lot 34. The item proposed for designation is a neo-Grec flats building constructed in 1876-1877 that has been home to the Lithuanian Alliance since 1910. And presenting is Jessica Fletcher.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Fletcher from the Research Department. The Lithuanian Alliance Building is a 4-story and basement neo-Grec building constructed between 1876 and 1877. Located in the northernmost limits of Chelsea, the building is both an example of the neighborhood's handsome residential fabric and of key cultural importance due to the Lithuanian Alliance's purchase of the property in 1910. The Lithuanian Alliance has occupied the building for more than 100 years and has supported the Lithuanian community in numerous ways from it, ranging from providing insurance policies to keeping the Lithuanian language press alive. At the public hearing on March 10th, 2026, 5 people spoke in support of designation. Speakers included a representative of the Lithuanian Alliance, the Consul General of Lithuania in New York, representatives of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, the Historic Districts Council, and 1 individual. Additionally, the Commission received 1 written submission in support of the proposed designation. The Lithuanian Alliance Building is located at 307 West 30th Street on the west side of the block between 8th and 9th Avenues. The proposed landmark site is the tax lot. In the early 19th century, this area was rural and the location of estates of wealthy families. As shown on this map, the future site of the Lithuanian Alliance Building was on Richard Harrison's property. Over the course of the 19th century, the neighborhood became built up with row houses and apartment buildings. The photo on the right shows the street the building was on, and the building can just be seen under the red arrow. The developer brothers Samuel J. and Edward E. Ashley bought the lot in 1867, and in 1876 filed plans for a 4-family dwelling with James C. Springstead as their builder. The 4-story plus basement dwelling held 1 apartment on each floor and was referred to as a French flat in documentation recording its construction. French flats were developed for the middle classes, and the term was intended to separate them from the perceived stigma of tenements. The 1880 census shows predominantly middle and lower middle class families living in the surrounding streets, slightly to the north of the fashionable heart of Chelsea. The Lithuanian Alliance was established in 1886, and the organization bought the building in 1910. They chose the site for its relative proximity to Ellis Island after considering sites in Brooklyn and as far afield as Boston. Fraternal alliances such as the Lithuanian Alliance were set up to help fellow immigrants weather the difficulties of life in the United States. It offered help in the form of material aid like insurance policies, health benefits, and loans, as well as seeking to preserve and propagate Lithuanian cultural heritage. Lithuanians have a long history in the United States. A famine in 1867 to 1868 brought an early wave of Lithuanian immigrants to the US. Most of these new arrivals were poor agricultural workers. Though many arrived in New York and some settled in farms around the city, they often did not stay here. Instead, a substantial number found jobs in railroad construction and coal mining in Pennsylvania, as well as the stockyards of Chicago. Indeed, a surplus of agricultural workers in Lithuania brought many to America throughout the 19th century, spiking between 1889 and 1891 when there was a huge crop failure. There was also political instability and an oppressive Tsarist regime that prompted many to move in the late 19th century. It is difficult to accurately judge the number of Lithuanians in the US in the 19th century because Lithuanians were typically classified as Polish, Russian, or German in immigration statistics until 1899, and sometimes afterward. Lithuania did not declare independence until 1918, making the question of nationality a vexed one well into the 20th century. Nonetheless, there was a growing Lithuanian community in New York in the period, and in 1904, by one count, there were roughly 15,000 Lithuanians in New York and New Jersey, with many settling in Brooklyn and Long Island City. In addition to its other activities, the Alliance also published the Lithuanian language newspaper Tėvynė, which means fatherland. The paper was first published in Pennsylvania in 1896 and later in Boston, before moving to 307 West 30th Street around the time the Alliance bought the building in 1910. It operated in the basement of the building, as can be seen in the photo on the right, and was published on a weekly basis. The paper covered Lithuanian news for immigrants. In the period following World War II, the Alliance shifted from providing financial support to members in the form of insurance and health policies to offering opportunities for cultural enrichment. The building was altered in 1976 as part of a modernization plan that involved the facade being painted white and adding metal panels at the ground level, which entailed removing the lintels above the windows and the door surround, and this can be seen on the images on the left-hand side. Under the guidance of preservation architect Dean Koga, the Lithuanian Alliance removed these panels in 2018 and restored the historical features, restoring the appearance of the building as it was first constructed. Altogether, the Lithuanian Alliance building exemplifies the significant history of Lithuanian activity in New York City. The Lithuanian Alliance played an essential role in aiding immigrants, ranging from those recently arrived at Ellis Island to those with a longer tenure in the country. Using its basement printing press, the organization spread news and information nationally, creating a diasporic Lithuanian community in the United States. For over a century, the Lithuanian Alliance has been located at 307 West 30th Street, and it continues to be a hub of Lithuanian culture to this day. The Research Department recommends that the Landmarks Preservation Commission votes to designate the Lithuanian Alliance building as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Commissioners, do we have any questions or comments? Commissioner Goldblum?
Three buildings are really interesting to me because they're kind of banal in a lot of ways. We're not talking about Grand Central Station, St. Patrick's Cathedral. These are simple workaday buildings. They're nice. They're old. That's good. But the thing about them that makes them, I think, interesting as kind of typical individual landmarks is that they sit in a new city surrounded by buildings that completely disregard them, where they look strange and kind of left over, and they beg the question of the passerby, like, why is this here? What is this different, weird, little, old, plainish building doing? And it makes you ask the question. I think that's the point of landmarks in a way. It's like, it's a leftover from it tells a story of a past, and it tells us, and as landmark designations that are focused around immigration, the way it's kind of, they are exemplary of specific immigration stories, whether it's the Irish or the Lithuanians or other groups, but they're just bricks in a much bigger edifice of the city itself, which is a machine for processing and integrating immigrants and making them part of the city and the country. And it's, their banality in a way is makes that whole effort, I think, more poetic. Everything in the city in a way is contributing to the mission of the city as a place for immigrants to become Americans and to become New Yorkers and make the city a better place. And I think it's really lovely that as a group, even these simple, modest buildings that, kind of just hidden and not celebrated will become landmarks. I think it's really a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a comment? Commissioner Chen?
I'm just so glad Michael brought this up. As he was speaking, I was thinking about the other immigrants' press papers buildings, such as the Jewish Forward on East Broadway, although that one is much more well-designed and more ornate. But he does have a good point, which is that a lot of times we look at these buildings and we miss them and we don't recognize the significance. Especially in this area, we have so much of, historical figures and immigrants that pass through this area. And if it weren't for the destination or there's some sort of historic plaque that recognize who was here, you would never guess it in a million years. So I echo Michael's sentiment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. I also just want to share a personal reflection. I feel immense pride today to support these designations because I'm also an immigrant. I was born in South Korea and moved to the US as a toddler. I learned to speak English by watching TV, Gilligan's Island and Bewitched. And my parents were some of the earliest Korean immigrants to Spokane, Washington, where I grew up. In my teenage years, the Korean church was the center of our lives. It was where we tried to preserve our culture, cultural heritage, and my mother started the Korean school to teach children how to read and write Korean, and my father helped the church organize Korean cultural performances for the broader Spokane community. The church was really where older, more established immigrants, like my parents, helped new immigrants navigate the challenges of immigrant life. As a result, I feel a strong connection to the history of immigrants that we are honoring in these designations, from the early Irish immigrants who founded the church in St. Mary to the Lithuanian immigrants who established the Lithuanian Alliance building. So I just wanted to note that. Commissioners, do we have any other questions or comments on this? So if we're comfortable, let's go ahead and read the motion. I think I'm going to ask Commissioner Ginsburg to read the motion.
I just have to say, I recently discovered that one of my ancestors came from Lithuania. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Lithuanian Alliance Building, Borough of Manhattan, as a New York City individual landmark because of its special character and special historic and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP-2695 dated April 7th, 2026. I also move that the Borough of Manhattan tax map, Block 754, Lot 34, be designated as its landmark site as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners. The Lithuanian Alliance Building at 307 West 30th Street in Manhattan is our newest individual landmark. So I just want to say about these 3 designations that we have today, that as an immigrant, I am so proud that the Commission has designated these 3 individual landmarks. All 3 are examples of 19th century buildings that remain largely intact to their period of construction, and in addition, are culturally and historically significant to New York City. PS 15 Annex, Church of St. Mary, and the Lithuanian Alliance Building share a common story. As the city grew with waves of new immigrants from Ireland, Lithuania, and other parts of the world throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, these buildings served as beacons for new arrivals and their families, providing them with opportunities for education, religious community, financial assistance, and cultural connection. Today's designations are emblematic of New York City's historic and ongoing role in welcoming immigrants from across the globe. I would like to thank everyone who testified about the continued importance of these buildings to their communities and neighborhoods. And especially thank you to Margaret Herman and the research staff and all of the research department for their hard work in bringing us these designations today. Thank you. Okay. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our preservation agenda, and I'll turn it over to Corey Harala.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Master, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting items. The first is public meeting item number 1, LPC 26-07051, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 146, Lot 11, 109 West Broadway in the Tribeca South Historic District. This is an Italianate-style store and loft building built in 1860, and the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs. I will note that this proposal was originally given back in October of 2024. It was presented, there was testimony taken, and commissioners did discuss it. However, the staff withdrew that application due to inactivity, but the applicants wish to reactivate it. So we're bringing it back as a continuation of those prior discussions. So we'll have the applicants present that, or the staff do an introduction to that, whatever the case may be, after we open the proceedings.
Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open.
Good morning, Commissioners. Misha Hunter, Lee Saltzman Architects. We're really very grateful for everybody being here today, and we're glad to be back presenting a revised version of the proposal. So I'm just going to advance through here. Make sure that it works. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. My name is Misha Hunter, Lee Saltzman, and then Ahmad Sayer of New Tradition. And we're also joined by Jacqueline Regolia, also of New Tradition, and she's a specialist with regards to hand-painted signs. So in case there are questions regarding technique. So as Corey mentioned, this application did come before the commission previously, but in a different iteration and a very different design that was proposed. So I think what's really important today is to be able to impress upon the commissioners, impress upon all of you the way that the team has taken the comments that were received very seriously and really try to take all of the constructive criticism that was previously received into account. And what we tried to do was synthesize the comments in a way that, again, would provide the guidance that our team needed in order to take the necessary steps that are going to be presented to you today in this revised design. The first item that I wanted to mention was that it's our understanding that Landmarks has not found that historic signs need to be preserved. So that was something that came up in the last hearing. The other thing that I think is very important about this particular site is that it is unique. It is not a precedent in that it has a history of multi-story signage on a primary facade of a corner building, and that the West Broadway facade of this corner building was meant to have signs. The LPC also previously acknowledged the presence of a lot of signage in Tribeca, and of course that signage as well as the Tribeca districts have evolved over time. There was acknowledgement about the painted sign historic record, at least since 1939 until 1975 and beyond. Particularly for these two hand-painted signs on the West Broadway facade. There was recommendation for restudying the proposal so as not to detract from the historic architectural features of the building, looking again at the size of the signs, the proposed design, and then also their relationship with the historic architectural features. There was a recommendation to restudy the signs, again, to have a creative and meaningful response to the comments that had been previously presented. And really looking at a unified signage campaign rather than having a bifurcated approach where there would be a different vendor or different advertiser associated with the two different signs, instead encouraging a holistic approach. There were some comments with regards to the size and relationship of the signs to the building, particularly a strong recommendation that the painted signs should complement the facade without overwhelming it or dominating. There was encouragement that the signs be reduced in size and that the approach be a little bit more recessive and quieter so as to harmonize with the building's architectural features. There was a request that the signs be redesigned to better align with the architectural recesses, the brackets of the facade, the window datums. So again, just trying to work with the architecture that's there. There were some comments with regards to design content and graphics, particularly to have more inspiration. Take more inspiration from the design of the historic signs and their intent. We did note that one commissioner did find the signs were reasonable and historically relevant and worked with the architecture. There were some comments with regards to restudying the signs and again, work with what's there. There were some comments with regards to restudying color and scale. Again, working with the fabric that we have on the west facade of the West Broadway facade of the building. And of course, having a frame so as to not confuse the signs with the actual historic facade. And there were some concerns about a master plan in terms of regulation and looking for a more site-specific response. So there, again, a number of these comments are very technical and very specific. And we will certainly walk through some of the changes that have been made, but we also acknowledge that a number of commissioners were not present at that prior meeting. So we do have a number of slides relating to more of the history and research that we did do. So we're going to also share that information today, particularly so that those commissioners that weren't here previously will have the benefit of all of that information. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for your time today. Great. So what we'd like to do now is jump right into the sign details. And so what we are proposing, as Misha had mentioned, are two hand-painted signs, each roughly in size 11 by 20 feet, sitting on the west facade of West Broadway, and that is the primary facade. And most importantly, that's where the signs have been historically. The one thing I want to flag right away as Michelle also had mentioned, is the significant reduction in size. We've reduced the size of the signs, both panels, by about 8% in total. The two panels will work together as one unified campaign for a single advertiser. To further sort of simplify the impact of the signs, we've designated the left sign as dedicated entirely to typography. So clean, historic commercial fonts, flat backgrounds, no color saturation, keeping again within the historical significance of the sign. The right panel would be dedicated entirely to pictorial art. Think vintage illustrations, not modern photography, hand painted like murals you'd see from the early 1900s. Finished in a 100% no gloss matte finish, no shine whatsoever. So a little bit more detail in terms of how the sign is ultimately going to get executed. There will be a solid painted border around each sign. We've hand-picked two neutral tones that we feel work very well with the sandstone facade, and those colors are alabaster white and warm parchment. Very recessive, not fighting with the building at all. Really, really sort of complementing the existing color of the building itself. And on color, this is something that we've put a lot of thought into, and we'll get into a little bit about the backstory and the process that we used in order to land on these colors. A lot of research into the scientific impact of how colors are received by the eyes, speaking with independent artists, speaking with our internal production team on what would be the best palette, the best color palette to be used for these particular signs. And so everything comes from a low chroma palette, colors that sort of naturally recede in the daylight. And because paint looks different in full sun versus shade, and we acknowledge that, we've built in sort of predefined ranges for each color, a light, a center, and a dark tone. We'll get into the specific palette in a few slides here. And this way, there's a little bit, we're giving the painters and our creative teams a little bit of flexibility and being able to sort of use the hand-painted technique to soften things as long as they feel within the three stages that we've presented.
So just, again, wanted to just sort of summarize some of the appropriateness arguments that we've tried to identify for this revised signage proposal. As you'll see later in this presentation, monumental painted signs on the principal facade of this corner building have existed at least since a little bit post 1939, and the proposed signs would communicate that evolving commercial nature of the Tribeca Historic District. That painted wall signs are a traditional method of advertising that was historically found in this district, and we'll show some examples of that in a few moments. The proposed signs would be in keeping with the historic character of the facade, the streetscape, and the evolved commercial nature of the district. The hand-painted application of the proposed signs would be in keeping with the traditional application methods that would be typical of the district. That the proposed signs would include this outer frame, as Ahmad mentioned, that recalls the details of historic paneled signs that were found on this building. The placement and size of the proposed signs would help them to relate to the scale of the historic signs, the 5-bay rhythm of the existing facade, the spatial relationships of the window sills and the cornice brackets, which would cumulatively help them to remain as more of a subordinate presence on the building and the streetscape. That the proposed signs would have a vendor tag at the bottom, and that the signs would emulate the style and the aesthetic of the historic painted wall signs, particularly with signage dedicated to one side and graphic only to the other side.
So to summarize the key changes, there's 5 concrete changes. Again, the signs are smaller, coverage down to about 8%. The panels now align, again, as Misha mentioned, to the architectural lines of the building. We've provided a before and after from our original proposal to the revised proposal where we're currently standing. We've split the design into a typography panel and a pictorial panel on the right. We've locked in a matte finish and we've defined a specific color guide. You know, this is genuinely a different proposal versus the one that was originally presented. This isn't simply just a tweak. Now, what this slide is trying to convey is that, again, these aren't the previous images or previous image on the right isn't necessarily just a rendering. We've built actual guardrails around what can and can't appear on these signs. And so again, left panel typography only, historic fonts, flat background, no saturated color, no bold graphic shapes on the left panel. Right panel, vintage illustration style only. Any imagery has to look hand painted. Shading, highlights, depth, all need to mimic the historic style that that you would see in hand painted murals from the early 1900s. Photorealism is prohibited. Modern 3D is prohibited. If it looks like it came off of a computer, you won't find it on this sign, essentially. And the execution standards are very, very simple. Again, hand painted only, 100% matte, border in one of the two approved color ranges that we've. Now, in terms of the methodology, in order to land on the proposed color ranges, it was a very, very deliberate process. Every color has come from approved ranges, and each range, again, has a center color and two boundaries, a light and a dark. This way we have a little bit of discretion to stay within these limits, which is really important for a hand-painted application on masonry. But again, the final result has to land inside of the ranges that we are going to be presenting shortly. And every submission that we present to the commission will come with a reference list of the specific colors used in those designs to help keep things fluid and keep things consistent, so that compliance can be checked directly against those colors. We're not going to be taking a sort of, just trust us methodology. There's going to be a paper trail and there's going to be consistency with every single submission. And now, arguably the most important slide of the day, the proposed color guide. Again, a lot of thought, a lot of science, a lot of conversation with art professionals, artists, muralists, in order for us to land on this proposed color guide, taking in a lot of the comments from our last meeting as to not overwhelm the facade, keep consistent with the historic nature of the signs. These are colors that you will generally find in historical murals, muted, grounded tones, earthy neutrals, soft greens and blues and warm browns. These aren't your typical corporate brand colors by any means. They're the kinds of pigments that are, again, used in historic commercial signage. And under natural light, they sort of naturally recede and not overwhelming to the eye. Again, the intention of these signs is to age with the building over time. For the proposed border colors, we have two options: alabaster white and warm parchment. And as to not sort of overwhelm and pop out and really sort of blend in with the historical significance of the signs. The good graphic as to current view of the signs and our proposals over time and where we are today. We feel very confident that we've been able to address all the concerns and comments from the past. Again, it's really just an entirely new proposal, entirely different signs, very different approach. And hopefully this is something that we'll all be able to get behind.
So I'm just going to do a little bit of I'll do it quickly. A quick rewind. So just to say that the building, is located in the West, let's see here, Tribeca West Historic District. Also, the applicant had previously gone to DOB for a ZRD1 application, which was approved. I was able to find some really amazing signs, historic signs, photos of these in the Avery Library at Columbia. These are particularly documenting corner buildings on West Broadway that had multi-story advertising signs. I think one was for if you had a stomach upset, it was a medication, and another one was for smoking tobacco. So what's really important here is that the corridor of West Broadway in the Tribeca districts was a really, really important corridor, not only for vehicular and pedestrian traffic, but also for signs. Just to show some other examples, not only in the building, but also in the district for signs and accumulations of signs. There was also a really great example, actually, that Landmarks research staff found on the far left for the paste, paper, paint, push as an example of promoters of publicity. We also note with great interest that Oscar Geed, who was a billboard magnate in Times Square, previously had his offices at 109 West Broadway. We won't go into all of the history here, but suffice it to say that particularly in the post-World War II era and in the Cold War era, there were very broad campaigns from paint manufacturers to encourage people to paint their homes. And during the Cold War, it was believed that if you painted your home and maintained it well, that would help you to survive nuclear annihilation. We also have the historic photos, and here I want to point particular attention from the images of 1939 and 1975. So we can definitely see that the paint, paste, paper, push signs that are there presently existed at least before 1975. And I'll show you a brief summary of the dating of the signage text, probably to the 30s and 40s. We actually had a graphic artist analyze the signage that's there and the painted signage that's there and the historicity of it, font style, the typology, and then also I forgot to mention the importance of push as a nomenclature for advertising specifically from the Oxford English Dictionary. And then some of the dating again and some additional information. So with that, I would conclude the presentation and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
So as you know, the neighborhood has changed. Who occupies the three upper floors? Is that, who occupies the three upper floors? Is that rentals or lofts or who lives there?
Can I answer? Yeah, my understanding is that there's mixed use in the upper floors. Obviously, there's a commercial ground floor tenant for coffee retail. On the upper three floors, I think there's a residence, apartment residence. There's a school and possibly another business. So it's definitely mixed use.
Is it mixed use? Okay. Thank you.
You know, I have a question. From the previous time that you came, I think you've come 3 times, has the size changed from the last time? Not the first time.
Yeah. Yes, it has. Yeah.
Could I see this side by side?
Yeah.
No, not that one.
Should it be this one? This one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the height and the width, I guess?
Yeah,
It kind of looks the same.
yeah, the top is lower, the bottom is pushed up.
Yeah, 2024, the last one. So that from 2024 to the revised, you said it was decreased 8%?
Decreased 8%. We can follow up with more updated renderings to
Mhm.
show the difference in sizes. But ultimately, both panels are going to be size 11 by 20. I don't have it in front of me right now, but the
Mhm.
previous size was about 8%.
Okay, so it looks to me like from the 2024 proposal to the current proposal, the primary change I can see immediately would be the color change, tone change, and perhaps the matte. I don't know if we had matte in 2024.
Correct, yeah. The 5 significant changes were, the matte coloring, the color guide.
Right.
Landing on 2 specific colors for the borders themselves, the size chain, and then dedicating the left panel
The text.
consistent with what we see in the current view with the
Mhm.
paint and push, dedicating the left panel to typography only.
But we did that in 2024.
We have.
Yeah.
But we've muted the colors this time around.
Okay, so,
And then the right side, and just sort of reiterating it for those that weren't here in the last meeting, and then the right side being for the illustrative.
Right.
uh,
okay,
Style for the lettering has now been significantly changed from what was previously presented to something that's much more historical. Thank you.
thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
So in terms of graphic design, one is dynamic and yours is static. What's the difference in your eyes between the dynamic and the static? Do you think it matters, or does the static design better? I mean, how do you feel about it? Your opinion on it, yeah.
No, I think that was a direct response to the comments that we received last year about muting sort of the design style, staying a little bit more consistent with the what we've seen historically on these signs. I think the original proposal, the second one from the left, was loud. And candidly, looking back on it, we have to agree with the comments. We felt like it was a little out of place. We like the direction that we've taken, and we like where we're at now. It's a little bit more consistent, again, with the historical murals of the building.
Could the applicant just clarify? I think you mentioned something about a change in the types being put forth at this point in time. And I see on one page, there's in parentheses, serif, sans serif, and block. Are you suggesting those are the only 3 types that would be allowed, or is that still open to what? What are the guardrails on that? There's a suggestion that it's only historic types. So I'd like to understand better what that means.
And so font styles, consistent with historical murals, historical hand-painted techniques. So what this specifically is saying is we want to prohibit big, bold, blocky letters, 3D lettering. We want more of the commercial sort of serif, sans serif block. That's a larger family of font styles. And if helpful, we can provide more examples of what that looks like. But what we want to stay away from is, again, sort of like the 3D graffiti style, really loud type of fonts that you'll see in most commercial advertising nowadays.
Had the graphic artist look at the historic signs. I think one of the graphic type fonts that they identified was the sans serif. Let me just go to this. Yeah. Sorry, Franklin Gothic condensed bold was one of the typologies that they said. Yeah.
So if I can just jump in just to sort of get some clarification and maybe some perspective for the commissioners. So the reason this is being treated so differently, or being proposed to be treated differently from other painted wall signs, is because it's on the primary facade. Typically, we would not be approving these signs at all. It just would be the DOA on application to put big advertising signs on the primary facade of a building. This is different because this has historically had some signage on the primary facade. In the past, when the commission also looked at regulating painted wall signage, it originally started with a whole bunch of criteria to try to control the sort of photorealism and the impact of these really large images and sort of photorealistic images through paint color and other things. And we found it very, very difficult to regulate because of that. So we sort of amended our view with signage, and again, talking only about signage on secondary facades, to sort of with the assumption that by limiting the size of the approval, the impact of letting people kind of do what they wanted was less apparent and less detracting. So that's where we landed. And this, I think, what these applicants are trying to do is trying to sort of come back and propose a variation on sort of content regulation, sort of design regulation, in an effort to argue that their potential signages won't be detracting on the building. So that's kind of what you're being asked to sort of vote on. And so I think, Commissioner Jefferson, the issue of I think historically and in the past when this came forward, the commissioner thought having two big graphic signs on either side was way too much, and that at a minimum they had to limit one of those panels to text and one panel to sort of image. That was just sort of felt like that was one way to make sure it wasn't going to be too distracting. So that was one step the commission took in that direction. And now the applicants have come back, proposing again a series of design and color limitations that they hope will result in a feeling that the sign here and a reduction in size that won't detract. Again, that's something that you're being asked to sort of think about and review. And the staff comments have had, obviously have some thoughts on that as well. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
It's been a while. So the current signs are legal but non-conforming. Is that what we're calling them?
I believe. I'll let the applicant answer that question.
Hi, Jacqueline Regolia, for the record. So essentially, these are considered what we call ghost signs in the industry, right? So there was a time where zoning allowed these to be advertising signs. Over the years, neighborhoods get rezoned, the overlays are put on different areas which prohibit new signs, which is why we are here, right? So this is a ghost sign. It's not an active sign, but it would fall under a non-conforming area, so to speak, if that makes any sense. Right.
Okay. So where does that fall with LPC? Like, is that a violation or?
Oh, there's no violation here, but they want to change this. They want to change what was basically a ghost sign, and now they want to be able
So
to
to make
regulate
it an active sign, they need R. Okay.
Correct.
So whenever a new company wants to put their sign up, it comes before.
Well, so in the past, going back to sort of the history of the regulation here, we did require people come back to us every time they would change the sign, because way back when I started here, signs weren't changing that often. They were up for years, and that's not the model anymore. The model is the changing a lot.
So they can just change.
That became unworkable. And so what we've done is we've approved master plans that require that they document and show us pictures, and each one of these master plans is good for only 10 years so that we can sort of evaluate, is it working in this particular location and building?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
If I may just piggyback on that as well. I'm very passionate about hand-painted signs and have been for a very long time. for me, this truly is a continuation of history. Having these painters up, I don't know if any of these commissioners has actually seen production taking place. The way it activates the community is like pretty special. It's very moving. It's people, tourists, community members, the like, are very interested to see who, I mean, these painters often describe themselves as wall dogs, to be doing advertising the way that their predecessors did, to continue to give them this sort of avenue, another place so they can continue working themselves here in New York City. We do not have a massive amount of hand-painted signs, and to allow artists to live here and paint here and have a canvas to continue the historical nature of advertising is what I'm so particularly passionate about in this space. I think what we propose here today, the reduction of size, the color analysis, really shows that we are committed to preserving the area and the way advertising was done in the past. And we'd really appreciate the opportunity to continue that history here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Chu and then Commissioner Mahan.
Can you go to the slide that shows the color range that you're proposing? And also, can you explain, you say you have two border colors, so that means that it could be either or depending on the advertising?
Yeah.
And in your renderings, was alabaster white, the white version of the previous
I believe
examples?
in the renderings, I believe we went with the warm parchment color.
But on the left there?
On the left, this was before we landed on those two colors for the border.
Okay,
And we just defaulted to a standard white.
white,
Which we felt was a little loud.
bit contrasty.
Yes,
So
exactly.
the one on the right is now the warmer of the
Warm
two,
parchment.
and the light you didn't depict for us. And can you show me the range of I guess there's somewhat sepia tones? Okay, so is this saying that this is the range of colors that an artist has to work in? Is that what this is
That's correct.
proposing?
This is the proposed range, and with every design that's submitted for review, we're going to be outlining exactly which colors from this range were used in the design, in the course.
So just so we're clear, all of these colors can be used in any particular design.
Correct.
Okay.
However, there won't be, again, to kind of sort of keep things a little bit more historical, the left, there won't be any sort of blending. There won't be any intense background applications. We're going to be keeping solid colors. Again, keeping it simple.
Commissioner Mahan, did you have a question?
Start with an easy one. What's a vendor tag?
Yeah, it's what you see right in the middle under the middle bay windows.
The neon green thing. That's probably not on the color chart.
We can definitely update that.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Sorry. Yeah, a plaque or whatever you would like to call it, a vendor tag. Different industries call it different things. That's been customary on every single Landmarks campaign design. If you would like us to take a look at adjusting those colors as well, so we could speak about that. Again, it'd be painted on the building. It's not going to be a shiny metal affixed vendor tag.
To revise the coloring for the vendor tag as well, so that aligns with the colors that are proposed for the two signage panels.
Thank you. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the relationship between what is represented on the right-hand side, I suppose, and the use of colors. One of the guidelines you noted is that photorealism is prohibited. To my eye, the right-hand side looks photorealistic, even if it is rendered in sepia tone. That looks like a photo. And I'm also unclear about how one would achieve that image without blending, which I presume means colors. So like if there are color blocks, how does one achieve the image on the right, and how is the image on the right not photorealistic?
How do you achieve, let me answer the second question first. How do you achieve those blends? We're restricting blends on the left panel. We're allowing for blends on the right panel. And the reason for that is because when you review the signs in its current state, the signs in their current state, consistent with how the current murals are and how they were historically painted. You'll see the hand holding the brush. There are blends there, so staying consistent with that, whereas the left panel was dedicated to typography. So in terms of photoreal, really the distinction is, are you using hand-painted techniques to deliver a visual image that feels painted versus you're slapping a vinyl or a static sign onto the wall? What's important to note here is the use of hand-painted techniques to create those images. You can look at a sign and you can really see and understand that this is a hand-painted sign versus a printed sign. That's the big distinction when it comes to the photorealism. The color guides, the intention is to stay within the light and the dark of each color that's proposed here. There's a light, there's a medium, and there's a dark. So for the right side of the right panel, as long as we're within the range, then it would be considered approved. Can't go lighter than the light, can't go darker than the dark.
Commissioner Jefferson?
Photorealism doesn't have anything to do with technology. It's just a painterly technique, right? So if you don't want to have photorealism, you can't avoid it because it's just an artist painting. It's not a technology thing. It's not printed. And an artist paint photorealistic work all the time, or they paint just realistic work, or they can do whatever they want. So I think, if it becomes photorealism because an artist is painting it, we can't avoid it.
Understood. There are paint and mural techniques though that really separate what a hand-painted mural looks like from a static sign. And the intention here is to make sure that we're staying consistent with those historical techniques versus, believe me, our muralists can get up there and paint a sign and you wouldn't be able to tell whether it's painted or if it's a static sign or a vinyl sign that's attached to the building.
I don't think we should get into that argument, photorealism or not. I think it's just realism, period.
Right. Yeah. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, a couple questions. If we can go back to the comparison to the before and after, that'll be helpful. No, the 4 different versions. Right here. So compared to the original proposal, how much less is this version now versus the I know you said it's an 8% reduction to the 2024 proposal. How much is that compared to the original proposal?
I'd have to get back to you on that. We've had several changes, so if I had to guess, somewhere around 15% less.
Okay. So the rationale for the latest proposal is that I presume you're using the windowsill as a datum. All right. And on the upper one, I presume is near the top of the window. Is that correct? Okay. Hypothetically, if this were to be denied, what happened to that 2 blank wall in the middle for the ghost signs?
Oh, so the remaining space.
Yes. normally on the facade, you have windows, right? And in this case, how long can this sign last until your next painting? And then what would the treatment be on the facade?
I mean, this will just continue to degrade, especially with the type of weather that New York has been seeing, intense winters, lots of rains. I probably couldn't give you a time stamp, but it will just continue to diminish, fade, and crack.
If I may have a suggestion, I think for the record, I think you're doing a disservice for this presentation for the simple reason that especially the top and bottom, the bold color is what's distracting our view of this presentation, because none of these colors are going to be in this presentation. So if you cut off the top, cut off your new logo on the bottom, and take out the white on your bottom, which I think your tenant really needs a new color palette, it's a much more different presentation than, because we get distracted by that bold neon color. And the commissioner looking at this, why is this appropriate? And I think that for the record, you really should be using a much more muted, you're not painting these bright neon green on the top of this building. And I feel your passion for the vintage sign. I totally agree about the hand painted, the tradition being passed on as an art, because we get preservationists talk about neon signs that need to be preserved, correct, on historic buildings, and that's a different era versus this era. But I really think for the record, you really should, at least I would not allow the vendor tag to use that color if this is approved by the rest of the commissioner, but I do not know which way they're heading.
We'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay.
Clarify the record. Just to be very clear, the previous signs aligned with the top of the windows. The revised sign, both in 2024 and the current proposal, aligns with the top of the the spring line of the arch for the windows. So not at the top of the window. I just want to make sure
Okay.
that I clarified that.
Thank you. Commissioners, I think we're going to go ahead and move this along. I just want to note that Commissioner Ginsburg is recused from this item, and also that we actually had comments from the HDC that was shared with commissioners in advance. So let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. So this is a very interesting case here, and I think that we've gotten a lot of lively reaction because the potential of variability here is what I'm thinking about, is what could happen here and what is it that we're trying to put guardrails on. Ultimately, I think I respond to the character of the current view because there seems to be a feeling of tone that works with the existing building facade and those two graphic elements, and overall it feels cohesive. Whenever the images feel like they don't work with the facade coloring and I guess real estate on the facade, it starts to feel like it's very applied and doesn't belong there, or it's just stuck on. And I think that's what I'm trying to balance myself. The current revised proposal views feel better to me than the original proposal and 2024 views here. But I do realize that that was catered as an example that I think is an example that I would feel relatively comfortable with. The question is what else could happen here? That's just a possibility. The amount of colors shown in the range that could be picked do seem vast, and that does open a lot of potential for things that we might feel are jarring in the situation. I almost feel like there needs to be a little bit more guidelines on what is being controlled here. And in terms of the colors, it's not just the more muted or pastel or sepia tone, it's how you put them in combination. The other thing is when you look at the two current views, one is typology, the other is more organic in terms of pictorial, but they seem to balance each other because they have a similar sense of style or character. There's a balance there. Every proposal will look different to us. Even the type of font changes a lot, or the color of the font can change a lot. I just think that within the proposal itself, the piece needs to have a limited range of difference. If you pick a certain color that's in sepia, you don't want to be going to another color range that completely the opposite side of the spectrum. So what we consider, or what I consider appropriate in this historic context situation, is that there's a sensitivity to that historic condition. So I feel that there is an appropriateness to this, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I do feel that the current proposal still opens up too much to possible range. And I would like a little bit more control of that. The two border options, I like the one that's being proposed more than the lighter one. I think it works well with the color of the facade. I don't know if we need two. I think I could approve the one that's being depicted on the right. Without having for the commission to review each proposal and its validity or appropriateness on the facade, we have to accept a certain guideline here. I guess what I'm promoting is a tighter set of guidelines there. I want to know what my fellow commissioners think about that. But maybe also, could we consider a smaller time period from the 10-year to a 5-year or shorter amount of time, because this is so visible, so frontal on the street that, signage changes. So this gives us a little bit of time to think what's the best way to control it as we see the next period of half a decade as opposed to a full decade of approval here. Are my thoughts.
Thank you. So, Commissioner Chu, are you suggesting that we tighten the color palette? And what would
Yes.
the range be that you would propose?
Again, it's very hard to define these things. I think, again, for me, I like the sense of, there is, I guess we say this, the hand painted signage industry has had a rebirth, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, where I live, which is out on the borders of Brooklyn, Bushwick, it is everywhere, and it's super vibrant. It's actually very exciting for the city too. This is a slightly different condition. I support hand painted signage, but there is technique too. I mean, there are sort of techniques that can be used to make the signage feel more of the old style of painting. And so not using glossy, I think, is one thing that would help here, but there are really techniques. And I think that we can define that a little bit in terms of the use of paint. They started to do it, but I think it's still a little open.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ikumbe?
I feel many of the sentiments that were presented by Commissioner Chu. As a place to display these signs, I do believe it's appropriate. I believe there's a history that has been presented, and I think it's actually a unique instance, and I think certain things of that nature should be preserved as well. I agree that it's difficult to manage what is going to be presented potentially in the future. As was explained, technique, styles, even just imagery it's in itself and how it balances with the text that's used on the other side. Each iteration will look completely different. And I do also believe that the color range is very wide. It really depends on how you use it and you put them together, and you can come up with almost anything. And I believe this is what the problem is how to actually regulate this. what's presented as the proposal today, I believe it works well. It works with the building itself. It's not too overpowering. And I'm just finding it difficult to find that line to actually, that these criteria to actually ensure that it will meet something that we will find acceptable in the district.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
Thanks to the applicant for coming back and presenting this proposal. I think it is a good proposal, and I think to add to the points, this current iteration, I think, lack of a better term, is probably the perfect option, but I think overall, I would probably need to see the less perfect options to understand how how wild that range can get in terms of colors and combination of colors and shapes, and it's just so many factors that go into this signage. I believe, like I said, I think the size is appropriate. I don't necessarily trust whoever's interpretation of the guidelines, though, and I think with creativity, they can use all of these parameters and find those different areas that may not be so appropriate. And I think that's where the challenges start to come in terms of how do you regulate or limit what someone can do. And I understand from the applicant's standpoint that they want to provide as much range as possible to make sure that they're able to generate the type of response they need in terms of people interested in advertising on this facade. So I think Commissioner Chu kind of said it pretty well in terms of the range of colors is probably too much. I would be concerned with how those ranges can be used together. In terms of text versus image, I think I'm fine with that. But also not being able to see every sign and over a long period of time where we kind of come back and we look at the results, there could be a long period of time where something is there that we wouldn't necessarily approve. And I think that becomes problematic. So those are my concerns. I think as presented is appropriate, but I think the guidelines need to be a little tighter.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in too, and I would say that the iterations that we've seen, the recent proposal is significantly better than what we've seen before. So I think that the current proposal that they have proposed, they've reduced the size, and the muted color palette is what makes this, I guess, acceptable. The issue is that the palette that you have presented to us, I feel looking at it that you could almost create the 2024 proposal using that color palette. So, I mean, the only way that I would feel very comfortable would be to have a very limited color palette, perhaps in the sepia tones, so that it does look like the current revised proposal, which is not actually what you're presenting for the master plan. So just wanted to note that. And also the vendor tag, I think we also have to mute that as well. Commissioner Mahan?
Thank you. I didn't have the benefit of seeing the previous public hearing and public meetings, but I think I'm caught up. A very sort of interesting proposal here, complex for not immediately appreciable reasons. Nonetheless, I do really appreciate the craft of hand-painted signs. I think it would be lovely to see something here and kind of support the vibrancy of the building and what that provides to the streetscape. That being said, it must be balanced with the fact that this is a primary facade. This is a little bit of a challenging proposal. Presentation was a little confusing. It's still unclear if the size was actually reduced. I don't believe that it was. Statements to the contrary, nonetheless. Some of the historic evidence, the location of someone's office or campaigns to paint one's house, seem irrelevant to me to the application at hand. And I find the guidelines, are illustrative of the complication that Mark was noting earlier of how difficult it is to regulate content. The guidelines as currently written are fairly muddled and very open to interpretation. So I would like to support signage here. Of the scale, I think would be fine with me of the revised proposal. I think an elevation drawing with dimensions would be tremendously helpful and alleviate people's concerns. I would support tightening the color range significantly so that it is largely in the sepia tone range. I would support reducing the time period to 5 years. I might suggest that a couple additional, theoretical, example signs might be provided, would be also a useful exercise for the applicant, I think. And I want to make one final note that, tightening the color range of the proposed signage does actually call into question what is the background color of the building itself. And as recent as 2015 to 2020, it was quite different. There was a clear base with a differentiated top. So food for thought, does that also lock the, in a backdoor kind of way, lock the applicant and us into this particular paint color and scheme for the building, which appropriate, I don't really know. But maybe that has to be maintained as well. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I echo some of the suggestions that many of the commissioners have made. I think the Chair Angie Masters' comment about a sepia tone range will be helpful. I think that this way, whether your concern is with photorealism, that will look like a, even at the worst case scenario, a antique photo, vintage photo. The other thing is obviously the range of the palette should be tightened, I think. And I echo Commissioner Chu's comment about of the two borders. He's correct in that the less bright of the two, is a preference for me. And I think that the size suggestions, the dimension on the drawing, I will highly recommend the applicant to, if they were to revise the submission, that the unnecessary heading color fonts all be eliminated, because it's really distracting. And obviously, the vintage, the vendor's color, the vendor tag color be absolutely not be that color that as it stands right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I liked it before. So I think that the changes that you're suggesting, that everyone's suggesting, will make it better. And so I can agree with the general consensus.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
So I would like to talk about a range of color. So these are warm colors that were selected, but I can also see an artist using cool colors or other colors and make it work beautifully here.
Yeah.
So I'm, if you want to go to range of color, if you say warm colors or you say cool colors with a lighter palette, it would work here. So I'm concerned about dictating control of range of color. Second issue has to do with the how long, 10 years, 5 years. I think we know pretty much now, if you put a sign, a painted sign, 2 or 3 years, it starts to flake off. We know that. We know what happens. So we should let the artist tell us if it should last 3 years, because they want their work to look really good. So 3 years maximum, 2 years, let them tell us, not we tell them.
Thank you.
The question is, I mean, I guess the question is if the commissioners are in favor of approving something that's, you know, a restricted color range, maybe in sepia tone, if that can be defined, and the background building color is sort of remains what it is, and that the term is 5 years, so we can actually see, and I'm sorry, and one border, right, one border, that maybe in a 5-year term, that gives us and the applicant something to work with, and then they can come back and because they're going to be showing us each one of these as they change. And maybe that's the best way to move forward. It's a very difficult thing to do here, but unless people want to see other things, have them come back.
Sorry, you just said as they change.
Right, remember, it's a master plan.
Period of time, not the mural change, so.
Right. So the time period for the master plan will be 5 years. They can change the sign, you know, generally, you know, as they need to, given the market. But they would be documenting each sign, because the way it works is they come in and they say, here's the proposal, here's how it fits with the master plan, staff approves it, and once it's done, they submit a photo so we can see how it worked. And then they can come back and we can evaluate it. I mean, that would be one way of doing this.
So, you know, that's the question. Do we take no action, or are enough commissioners comfortable with limiting to this sepia tone, you know, the lighter border, and a 5-year reduction in the master plan?
I'm comfortable with that personally. How do we define the limiting of the color range?
You have to work with staff by taking the palettes that they've already come down and putting X's through some of the boxes and not through others.
Okay, and I just to be clear, I think I was advocating, and maybe Everardo was too, that it's not necessarily saying you can't use certain colors, but that what you use has a palette that's within a certain variety of difference. So
I think that just makes it, gets us back to this problem of the staff having difficulty with the staff.
For me, it was kind of this, and somebody had said, I think Commissioner Chen said, so it looks like a vintage photo. And so it would kind of be this type of palette that blends in well with the background building color.
Well, that's because the colors within
Right.
the palette.
Right,
are closer to
exactly.
each
So
other.
that's basically what we would what we would limit to. That's what I was thinking.
Oh, you're using that example.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Sepia can also be other colors. It's not that sepia means only brown.
This tone.
No, there are sepia tones that are green too.
So I guess the question, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the question
Yeah.
is, would commissioners want to limit it or bring it back? Okay,
I could too.
okay. So
I like your comment to say that example is a good example to use as what we find appropriate. That's a good way to do this.
And I think if there's a disagreement between the staff and the applicant about what constitutes sepia tone colors, we will look at that and say it needs to be within the range presented in that image in the right. And if it doesn't, they'll come back to you all again.
So, Stephen, I think, you know, the sepia tone limit, the 5 years, the vendor tag, you know, within, you know, muted. And then the other, I think we're going to limit the master plan to 5 years.
Well, because typically.
It's usually 10.
Usually it's 10, and we're saying because this is because.
Atmosphere is such, things fall off.
No, but the point is they don't fall off anymore, Commissioner, because people are changing. They're changing. The image is changing almost all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And then, Stephen, I think
Yes.
the other thing that was important was the border.
Yes.
That we liked the,
Yes.
you know, okay. Yeah, if you'd like to read
Yeah,
the
I'll
motion.
give it a shot.
Thank you.
One more thing, Commissioner Chu, to add,
Yes.
to work with staff on the positioning and color of the vendor tag.
Oh.
Right.
Okay. All right, let me give this a shot. In the case of LPC 260705 109 West Broadway, Tribeca South Historic District, an Italianate style store with loft building built in 1860, the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs. Note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of Tribeca South Historic District. Staff also note, I also note that painted signage similar to what exists today is documented as dating from 1895 and coincides with the tendency of Oscar Good, who would go on to create the General Outdoor Advertising Company and who was known as the father of outdoor advertising. I recommend approval, noting that the application would be good for a 5-year period for master plan, that the border of the proposed signage within that 5-year be limited to the warmer tone that was previously shown here as an option, not the lighter tone, that the sepia tone, that the proposed artwork would fall within a sepia tone using the example here in the revised proposal of color tone range as an example of what is acceptable by the commission. And also that the applicant work with the staff on the position and color of the vendor tag, which was depicted here on the proposal as well. That the photographic evidence of abundant wall signage at this building and the extents have been at least, the approval is on the condition that the photographic evidence of abundant wall signage at this building and the extant signs have been in place since at least the mid-20th century, that the painted wall signs are a traditional method of advertising that was historically found in the historic district. Therefore, the proposed signs will be in keeping with the historic character of the streetscape and the evolved commercial character of this historic district, that the painted application of the signage will be in keeping with the traditional application methods typical of the district, that the placement and size of the two signs, one solely text, the other with an image, will help them relate to the architectural features of this facade by aligning with the spring point of the arch of the top of the most window and the sill of the bottommost window, that the signs will include a painted border with the warmer shade that will help distinguish the signs from the surrounding facade while remaining neutral in tone, and that the proposed master plan be limited to a certain number of years, and that 5 years, and that the applicant will document every sign approved under the master plan so there will be a record the commission can consider when reviewing the effectiveness of the master plan criteria. Did I get everything?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank,
Are you saying sepia is the color?
Yeah.
Tone,
So that,
we're looking at that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Kimbay, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quembe,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
nay.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
7 in favor and 1 opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you. Now that's been approved with modifications, so please continue to work with staff. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 26-06533, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 531, Lot 7503, 354 Bowery in the NoHo Historic District Extension. This is a stripped Italianate-style multiple dwelling with store building built circa 1832 and altered circa 1854. The application is to construct a cantilever over the building and landmark site associated with an adjacent new building to be constructed outside of the historic district boundaries. This was last presented at the public hearing of February 24th, 2026, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants or the staff will do an introduction after we open the proceedings.
Commissioner Wilder, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Ikumbe, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open. You may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Marie Garino, Preservation Staff. This item was last presented at the public hearing and public meeting of February 24th, 2026. During discussion, commissioners present expressed a consensus of support for the proposal. However, there were not sufficient commissioners present to vote at that time. The applicants are here today to give a brief overview of the proposal for commissioners who were not present on February 24th and to refresh those who were.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for allowing us to come back and see you again. My name's Chris Fogarty at Fogarty Finger Architects. Take you through the slides. I'll try and do it quickly just for those who weren't here. This is reminding us where we are. We're on the northwest corner of Bowery and Great Jones Street at the NoHo Extension Historic District. Part of the recently rezoned Soho NoHo Special District and upzoned at that time. The site is actually part of a much larger parcel of sites, and 360 was a 275-foot tower originally done with the original Zelda that brought these different parcels together. Our site sits here, and the historic district is these two buildings kind of like a tongue go between from the historic district, and they come through in between our site to the south and the 360 building to the north, and these two buildings, 354 and 356, sit in the middle. This is looking up at the site, looking north from the Bowery, and this is the site currently. It's got a one-story building and a two-story and on it, and I think a three-story building. This is the development site. This is looking across from the Bowery, a montage. These three buildings are the lots of the site, and that's showing the development parcel. This diagram shows the lot line wall on which we are proposing an 8-foot cantilever. This on the left is just a sheer wall going up, and this on the right, you can begin to see the cantilever. We'll have many more images of this. It adds about slightly over 5,000 square feet to the project. It's a rental building, so this is, we're increasing square footage and we increase the number of affordable units. It's, I think it's 20% or 25%, I can't remember exactly, but it goes from 27 to 30. It'll go up a few units as we add a bit more area to the building. This is some examples of previously approved cantilevers by the LPC. Just a reminder, I think you've all been reminded, we're here to talk about the cantilever portion of the building over the 354 Bowery, rather than the design of the building itself. So I'm sure if you feel free to talk about that, I'm happy to discuss that too. But these are some examples. This one is the on 57th Street. It's over the Art Student League. It's a much bigger cantilever. This one is recently finished down on 77 Greenwich above Dickey House, and is slightly different relationship to Dickey House than we're talking about. Perhaps the most similar to us is the Flatiron House that's gone up on 23rd Street, and this cantilever's over in a landmark district, and cantilevers over a historic building. Some of them are more successful than the others, and I think the Flatiron House takes some of the language of the local neighborhood and brings it together successfully. There are, of course, been many new projects in the NoHo district, especially in the extension district, a wide variety of different contemporary facades that have been approached, different ways of dealing with a New York City grid and how you might put that into the context of the neighborhood. And we ourselves took a bit of time to step back and think about how one might approach a cantilever rather than just a volumetric massing change, but is there a way to extend and step out from the building? And we looked at how the corbels and the brackets of some of these massive cornices that happen all over the neighborhood deal with some of that transition out of one plane and into another. We likewise took as the inspiration for our building facade we've been playing with this flat arched grid that is very predominant in the cast iron buildings in NoHo and Soho. And we looked at how you might reinterpret that and take that grid and maybe flip it and rotate it and extend it. But that forms the premise of the design of our facade. And then just looking at the elevations here, there's a deeply recessed ground floor, then two floors of 1 story, and then it transitions to a 2-story motif language. A deep recess at the setback level on the 14th floor and 15th floor, and then the dormer continues up. And so this is on Great Jones, and then a similar set of language exists on the Bowery Street side. And then this drawing on the right is where the cantilever happens. So you can see here we've got 354, 356, and 360. And this is our building here. This is set back 10 feet, and the cantilever sets out about 8 feet here. And we recess deeply with sort of oversized corbels that are picking up the same exact details and language that we have at the storefront and at this recess here on both facades. This is a rendering showing without the cantilever. It's kind of a dead-on elevation if you're a pigeon or something. And this is looking at it with the cantilever. It's kind of a little musty and hard to tell. This is looking at them set side by side. This is just looking at the building, looking up from the Bowery. You don't really see any impact of the cantilever here. You can see a kind of beige porcelain or facade and terracotta base. And you can see the deep recess happening on the dormers. This is looking back. This is looking south. And so this is this sort of lot line condition, which we would start some windows at around 70, 80 feet above 354. This is the cantilever, and this is showing that recess happening there, and then the cantilever going up. This is looking closer up with a photo montage, and then this is with the cantilever. So you can see the cantilever is about 70 feet above 354. So again, we're looking at the impact of this building with the cantilever above it. And then this is side by side. Then this is looking close up if you're on the other side of the Bowery and your head's looking straight up. And so this is without the cantilever. And then this is with the cantilever. And you can see the underside has articulation as well. And these vertical piers come back and pull back into the side. And then it steps out again as it gets to the 14th floor. That's it.
Just briefly address the settlement of the 2 historic houses and how your work is impacting that.
Yes, so you can sort of see it here. They're definitely the leaning houses of Bowery, and it goes from about 8 inches at the base, which is our separation that we're staying away from, and it increases to about 3 feet at the top. And so the 360 here has the opposite going on, where it starts about 3 feet separate at the base and goes towards 8 inches at the top. And we have the opposite. So we would do a very similar metal panel infill there. That would be a darker color and it's set back from the facade as well. So that, and then these corner windows will just edge back about 8 inches as well. So just to kind of allow that visual break to happen.
Thanks. And I'll just clarify, I mean, with or without a cantilever, the staff would still be kind of looking at what to do with that gap, but this is very unusual in that the buildings are leaning very significantly, several feet by the time you get to the top. So something
Wait.
has to fill that space between the new buildings, lot line wall, and those historic buildings.
You're saying that the gap increases as you go up?
Yes,
Yeah, you can see
dramatically,
it there.
several
If
feet.
it does the opposite here. You can see
Oh.
how small it gets there.
The settlement issue in the historic houses, is that why? And this facade on the left projects forward of the face of the historic houses there, or
It
they?
lines up, but we recess that little.
Oh, you
We're
line
putting
and
it
then you
back.
created a
Let me see it.
gasket in between? Yeah, it's hard to see.
Hard to see. We had a detail in the old drawings, but we don't have it here today. It's best in there. You can kind of, no, I can't.
And that, does that go up and over and become some kind of drainage thing on the roof? Is that a recess, or does it go higher than the
There'll be some sort of capping running perpendicular.
parapet
to
up against the
condition.
party wall condition and then drainage down to the roof? Oh.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
On page 10, on,
Tell me when I get there. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, I can see it here. I can't see it on my screen. Here we go.
so are these illustrations of cantilever over historic buildings, or they're something else?
They're cantilever over individual landmark buildings or historic buildings in a historic district, but each one is a cantilever that was approved by LPC within.
So which is the historic,
So this one is the Art Students League's, the historic building. This one is Dickey House, which is this beautiful little building here. And then this is the whole, I'm thinking it's Ladies Mile over there. No, what is it? Yeah. Yes.
So
The
we-
historic district. And
so-
so this is on 23rd Street.
So we have approved these. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want, because I wasn't here when, I guess this came in before, could you quickly summarize what the commission's concerns were about this and why?
So I wasn't here as well,
Oh.
but I think 5 commissioners supported it and 1 did not, so they didn't have enough commissioners to pass this. Did anybody else have any questions? Okay. So I'm just going to note that we did have some testimony letters from the HDC and Village Preservation, and there were also 181 individuals recommending denial. And let's see. So let's go ahead and start this discussion. Commissioner Mayen, would you like to start this discussion?
I'd be happy to. I'll try to do so briefly. As the applicant briefly reviewed his presentation from last time, I was in support of this last time. I'll note again, very much appreciate the testimony, much of which we heard at the first time this was presented. And this, we're dealing with, a moment where, complex issues of, modernization, preservation, development, and others, sort of come to bear on this little issue. I noted that there's a peculiar boundary of the historic district, that the district itself is quite varied. It has a mixture of scale, style, era, and even includes contemporary architecture. I find that the cantilever requested is quite modest and subtle, especially when compared to other cantilevers that have been approved by the commission in the past. It's also quite high above the landmarked buildings. It was sort of and I also noted that we make judgment calls, at every public hearing about scale and proportion. whether or not you've approved, an item of the similar type in the past. For example, some rear yard additions are okay, others are not, based on the specifics of those characters. I also find that there's kind of a clever abstraction of the corbels and brackets found in the historic district. I think it even improves the new proposed building, so I can find this appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I found this appropriate last time, and I think the question is, looking at the renderings with the cantilever 70 feet above these small buildings, does it have any real effect on my perception of the buildings? And I don't find it does, so I can find this appropriate.
Thank you. I'll go next. I wasn't here when this was first proposed, but I agree with Commissioner Mahan. I find that this addition, this cantilever, is very modest. It's very high up, and I don't find that it distracts from the historic district, so I can find it appropriate. Commissioner Wilder?
Yes, I was also found this application appropriate, similar to the reasons already mentioned. Yeah, I just think it's not, because it's not as close to the existing buildings. I think it doesn't take away from those structures.
Thank you. Commissioner Kumbay?
I also believed that the cantilever wasn't a large disturbance to the architectural character of the existing building. I think I did note also that the irregular boundary of the district itself, and I believe we also talked about the gap between the building, how that should be detailed. And I guess it should be looked at at the facade face, but also the flashing that would be required at the top, just to make sure it works perfectly.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I wasn't here at the last presentation of this proposal. Looking at it now from a non-cantilever to a cantilever, I tend to agree that the impact seems very minimal over those two houses down adjacent. I think it's appropriate. I keep looking at that condition that was raised between the buildings at the party wall. However, I think that is actually more impactful than what's up so high. I do think it needs to be resolved better with staff. Inherently, I think the thing that bothers me a little is that it suggests that it's an object building when it returns a corner, but in fact it's a street wall with a party wall facade right next to it. There's a bit of a conflict there. They just need to work with staff to minimize the feeling that we're exposing a condition that's awkward even more by doing so. So the coloration as well might impact that reveal condition. So again, I recommend a little more work with staff on the detail and colors of that condition.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
This was a tough one for me because over the weekend, I kept on thinking it's an issue of principle for me, and air rights and the building should be the same. And then I found out today that we have voted 3 times on this already. I find it appropriate now.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thanks. I was opposed to it last time, and I remain opposed to it. The reason was and remains that kind of what Stephen was saying, that there's a typology to New York City that sides are sides and fronts are fronts, and there's a kind of rhythm to the city that exists across time and across changes in zoning, that the party wall as a kind of urban element is, or the lot line wall as an urban element is I think a critical thing. And I think that the cantilever in this case breaks that and creates a different figure against the sky that is non-historic and does not enhance the district. I think that precedents shown were not necessarily relevant to this case. I think that the staff should look with the applicant when they dive into the issue of the reveal. I think one rather non-historic detail that looks kind of peculiar to me is the way the windows get snipped by the shears because the lot line happens to be where it is. I think that the reveal element that's on our side of the line can maybe do something to make that look a little less odd in its juxtaposition with the historic buildings. And that might involve making that infill material lighter or making it flush with the glazing, which might not be our default thought. But I think in this case, when the buildings are kind of being confronted with these rather aggressively sheared shapes, it might improve it.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I wasn't here the last time because I got called to jury duty, but I gave it a lot of thought and I look at the evidence. And I think that if you look at the how high up it is, and I agree with Commissioner Chu and a couple of the comments, I think that they should work with staff about, the non-cantilever versus the cantilever one. Obviously, that detail, they should work with the staff on the treatment up of that because I agree with the majority here that the being so high and to me is less acceptable the sheer straight up non-cantilever version because it makes it even more monotonous on the left-hand side in the context of this specific site. And so I'm less troubled than Michael Goldblum on the thing, but I think we agree on that they should work on the staff on the detail. But I think that being so high and there's a minimal projection, and given we voted on in the context of the other prior presidents of other buildings, I can find that appropriate.
Thank you. Corey, what kind of, how would you describe what the staff would need to work on in terms of the detail? Is it of the gap?
Yeah, it's the infill of that opening that exists due to the lean of the historic building. So the placement, materiality, and coloration of that infill, and perhaps how the new building itself joins that. And then any other issues in terms of detailing that happens where the roof of the historic building meets the new building.
Great. Commissioner Mahan, would you like to read the motion with that inclusion?
I'd be happy to. Regarding LPC 26-06533, 354 Bowery, NoHo Historic District Extension, a stripped Italianate style multiple dwelling with store building built circa 1832 and altered circa 1854. Application is to construct a cantilever over the building and landmark site associated with an adjacent new building to be constructed outside of the historic district boundaries. I recommend approval, finding that the cantilever of the new adjacent building located outside of the historic district will not touch, alter, or eliminate any part of the historic building in the historic district, that the proposed cantilever will occur approximately 71 feet above the roof of the historic building, and therefore will have sufficient height above and distance from its roof to neither overwhelm nor detract from any significant architectural features of the building, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district. The applicant should further work with staff to refine the detailing, specifically configuration, color, and materiality of the gasket piece, both at the front facade and the roof between the historic buildings and the new building.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, that's been approved. Please continue to work with staff, approved with modifications. Let's move to the next item.
Right, and we'll now move to the public hearing agenda, starting with public hearing item number 1, LPC 26-08086. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1392, Lot 68, 2 East 78th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, a vernacular neo-federal style residence designed by Irving Margan and built in 1937. And the application is to install windows and balconies in existing and modified openings, construct a rooftop bulkhead and pergola, and legalize and modify alterations to the rear facade.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. I'm joined today by the architects from McBride Architects. I'm going to take you through the presentation, and then the team is available for any questions you might have. As Corey mentioned, this is 2 East 78th Street, located on the south side of East 78th between 5th and Madison, located here in the map. And you can see it's the last building within the Upper East Side Historic District. This is the adjacent building to the east is part of the Metropolitan Museum District. It is a 3-story individual row house. And it was constructed in 1937-38. And you can see it's surrounded by a sort of complex streetscape of much taller buildings. Proposed scope of work that we'll be looking at will be some modifications at the openings and entry at the ground floor, modifying the second floor windows and creating Juliet balconies, replacing windows to match the historic, and then up at the rooftop, a proposed new code-required bulkhead, a shade structure, pavilion at the back of the roof, and a mechanical enclosure. And at the rear, as Corey mentioned, some work was done without the benefit of permit in the 1990s under a previous owner, and we're proposing to change the existing infill within the where a curtain wall currently exists. So this is a unique building. It's quite quirky. It was built in 1937 as part of a singular development of 965 Fifth Avenue. We see this is 965. It's an 18-story apartment building, and 2 East 78th Street was built as a light protector for the building. And so it was this 3-story, it's 25 by 25, about 32 feet tall. So it's essentially a cube. And as mentioned, it's in the vernacular neo-federal style, very kind of simple design. The open corner here that you see in the photograph on the bottom right is actually the service entry to 965. And so this is how everything, even to this day, goes through to the back of 965 Fifth. It's very interesting. It was developed under the same new building application. It shared a block and lot. It has a single entry in the designation report as a result of that. And there was a single certificate of occupancy for the 18-story building and this little house on 78th Street. In the historic map, you can see along the west side, sorry, of the property, that passageway that is the service entry today. The house was separately parceled off in the 1980s and became its own lock and lot. And there is an easement that allows for access through the site to 965. Here, tax photo, which is right around the time of completion, suffering from a bad case of efflorescence all over the facade. But again, in the context of much taller buildings, it's really an anomaly in the streetscape, and has some interesting proportions and solid to void ratio. And then by the time of designation, we see largely the same condition. Finishes have been changed to black painted windows, and similar to what we'll be seeing today under the current proposal. So the site is extremely limited, both in terms of its floor area and the actual constraints of the site itself. As I said, the lot is 25 by 25. It does not include this area at the back. So the rear lot that you see back here is actually part of 965. And so the house has an easement to use this space. This is not their backyard, though. They can't develop anything in that rear space. It's still under the control of 965. And then 965 has the easement through at the ground floor, so essentially limits the floor plate at the interior of the first floor to something like 20 by 24, and then on the upper floors, 24 by 24. The whole house is about just under 1,500 square feet. And so one of the challenges is that in maintaining the existing stair, how to get the bulkhead, which is again required by code, up to the roof, and not have it at the very front of the building. In 1983, there was an approval by the commission to ornament the building that included modifications at the ground floor, similar to what we're looking at today, adding a post, a column at the west end to, I suppose, try to make a more symmetrical composition, expanding the window openings as we are proposing today at the second floor to create French doors and balconies, Juliet balconies, flower boxes, and then at the rooftop, adding a balustrade and a false roof that gave it sort of a more formal sense of termination. Here are the existing conditions. As I mentioned, there was some work done in the late 90s that was without the benefit of LPC permits. They did have DOB permits. My suspicion is that it happened when the parcel was separated into its separate lot, and that it was a glitch between LPC and or the DOB trigger for LPC review. And so we have a recessed entry outside of the plane of the recessed from the plane that it was located in historically, single pane windows on the upper floors. A new door was added at the location of that window, and historically, and that has just a solid panel facing, and then the existing alleyway to 965. And so the proposal today is replacing the existing door. We're bringing it back to the historic plane, and the design is modeled on the historic. We'll look at that in detail. Restoring the opening of the window to the west, and then at the second floor, creating that larger masonry opening for French doors and Juliet balcony, and that on the third floor, restoring the windows to 6/6 and giving the facade just a greater sense of hierarchy between the bays and working out the solid to void ratio a bit. Up at the rooftop, the code required bulkhead and the shade pavilion and the mechanical enclosure, which has each of these elements has some amount of visibility from 78th Street and Fifth Avenue. We'll look at that. So existing is on the top, proposed is on the bottom, relocating the door to the historic plane at the front facade, and then restoring that window where the door currently exists. The historic door was a glazed panel at the top with 4 lights, a narrow center panel, and then a tall bottom panel. And so the proposals to replicate that tall bottom panel, combine what would have been those 2 upper panels into a single opening, and create a larger glazed area at the top half of the window of the door. New light fixtures there. And then at the restored opening, you can see that the original windows were 6/6 behind the ironwork. And so our proposal is a single pane window behind recreated ironwork, thinking that the ironwork gives the opening sufficient scale and detail, and also the single pane window will allow for more visibility and light into the space. At the second floor, the new Juliet balcony and French doors modeled on the approval from 1983. The projection of the balcony is 10 inches and 10 1/4 inches from the facade, and the code required height of 42 inches tall. So moving up to the rooftop, the bulkhead is a major driver for the project. As I said, the code requires a stair access to the rooftop under current code. So as you can see on the left, this is the existing section through the stair, the recessed entry. You begin the stair at the stair landing is at the back of the building and then extends to the front. And at the 3rd floor, there's currently a ladder and hatch that gets you up to the roof level. In order to extend that stair up to the rooftop, meeting the code required rise and run, and then the code required landing depth here, that gives us a sort of front face of the bulkhead set back 2 feet 7 inches from the front facade. The treatment of that is in a differentiated stucco. We'll look at that in the visibility to try to help it recede a bit from the main body of the house itself. We studied various options to reroute the stair. We have that in the appendix. If there are questions, we're happy to go through that with you. So in plan, what it looks like, the new stair bulkhead rising up, landing at the front of the building. This is 78th Street. We have FDNY clearance that has to access from the door through the site. There's the shade pavilion at the back of the property is here. These are the 4 posts. And then the mechanical enclosure at the west end. At the rooftop in section, looking east-west on the top, you have the stair bulkhead, that shade pavilion, which sort of slides over the proposed stair bulkhead. We need to have 9 feet clear from the bottom of the pavilion in order to allow for FDNY access across the roof. And then similarly, looking north-south, here's the section, the setback of the bulkhead itself, the materiality, the bulkhead would be a buff-colored stucco, and then the west face is glazed. This helps it recede even further when we take a look at the visibility. Also brings light down into the space itself. And then the pavilion will be finished in a bronze aluminum finish, dark bronze. At the rear, this is another one of those elements that happened in the 1990s that did not have LPC permits, and it's an existing curtain wall construction that is surrounded by what I imagine was the historic masonry wall that's been stuccoed over. So it's curtain wall, a combination of vision glass and spandrel glass, this large spandrel, metal panel spandrel between the basement level and the 1st floor, and then grill-covered doors at the basement level. And then looking up at the facade, this is the area that's used through the easement as the rear yard, and then looking out to the rear yard from the house itself. And so the proposal is to replace the existing curtain wall with a simplified version, and then introducing a new masonry spandrel between the basement level and the 1st floor. This is a window wall configuration at the lowest level and curtain wall above. While it did not receive a permit initially, this is fairly consistent with other approvals that the Commission has made in the past, preserving the masonry wall and introducing a glazed wall with divisions and scale-giving character that would be determined as appropriate. So we think that what is there could have been found appropriate at the time, but certainly what we're proposing today helps establish the varying floor levels of the house itself and gives it scale and character consistent with how the Commission views things in contexts like this where we have no donut, highly irregular context, and a need for light given the surrounding height of the buildings. Just some details of that infill at the basement level and upper floors. And the material palette is sort of soft black for all of the windows and doors at the primary and secondary facades, the buff colored stucco for the bulkhead, a gray finished fiber cement for the mechanical enclosure, and then the dark bronze pavilion roof material for the roof end posts. And then just looking at that in context, on the left is the rendered view overall of the proposed condition. And then in details, we have mock-up and detail zoom of the rendering. And so looking from the east along 78th Street toward Fifth Avenue, we can see the bulkhead is visible in this location. And then from directly across the street, you can see the overall proposal in context, the new door, the restored window opening, and the windows behind the restored ironwork, the Juliet balconies and French doors, restored windows at the uppermost floor, and then the bulkhead and shade pavilion receding behind it. And again, the palette intended to blend with everything that we're seeing here in the surrounding context. From Fifth Avenue, we get a view of both the bulkhead, this is the glazed facade of the bulkhead itself, and then the pavilion sliding over it, and the mock-up to the right. And then the final view from a little bit to the west on East 78th Street with the proposed bulkhead, the pavilion, shade pavilion, and this is the only view where we get a glimpse of the mechanical enclosure, which is tucked away back here. And I would note that this is a seasonal view. This tree is very dense. It's actually a whole line of trees, which I'm not sure of the species, but they're very dense and beautiful come spring. So that is it. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
So I just want to understand, the reason you're doing the stair bulkhead is for roof access. It is the access now is grandfathered, so it's only because you want roof access for the recreation roof that you're building the stair.
No, it's the project itself, the extent of the project, of the interior project and the other changes that triggers the requirement for to meet current code. And that's what's triggering the need for the bulkhead. It's not the access to the roof.
Wouldn't the existing access be grandfathered?
Introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Caroline Otto from McBride Architects. Thank you for speaking with us today. Because we're the buildup of the floor's interior has the structure at the bottom and a very dense buildup, and sort of has a very low ceiling height. So we're replacing the internal structural slabs and steel structure, and that percentage of replacement makes us a new building on the inside, even though we were historic.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, could you
Commissioner Goldblum?
Sorry, can you just run through why you wouldn't want to, given the scale of what you're doing, flip the stair around so that the stair goes from front to back instead of from back to front, thus making the front of the bulkhead less visible? Looking in your appendix, but I can't quite follow the why.
It's a combination of how we're relating to the basement, which is a fully occupied space. And we're maintaining the interior, the existing stairs from the.
Oh, even though you're ripping out everything else, you're keeping the stairs.
We're keeping the stair.
Ah.
The clients liked the stair. It's cantilevered actually off of the wall. Bringing the rest of the slabs.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, let's go ahead and see if we have any public testimony. I don't think, do we have anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that we don't, let me turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function, after which you'll be promoted to panelists. We ask you to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker is Zainab Turan.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Zainab Turan, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Our Preservation Committee finds the proposed facade changes appropriate and consistent with the building's historic character. Replacing the second floor windows with black painted 6/6 double hung wood units restores the original configuration and historical accuracy. We also support modifying select first and ground floor openings. Converting windows to doors and doors to windows preserves the facade symmetry and composition. Friends appreciates the applicant narrowing the projecting balconies following the Manhattan Community Board 8 hearing, as this reduction lessens their visual impact and intrusiveness along 78th Street. Regarding the rooftop, the committee supports the stucco-clad stair bulkhead and dark bronze shade structure as compatible additions. However, we remain concerned by the extensive glazing on the bulkhead's Fifth Avenue elevation. We urge the applicant to reduce this glazing to ensure the bulkhead recedes, better harmonizes with the adjacent building, and avoids drawing attention to itself, particularly when illuminated and visible through the glass. Thank you, Commissioners.
Anyone else joining via Zoom who wishes to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Did the applicant want to address the comments? Okay. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this discussion?
Whoops. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think that this is a fairly simple one. I think the changes in the front are fine, that although the bulkhead is visible, it is very secondary, and that their changes to the rear facade are an improvement over what's there now. You know, I know there's some question about the window color in the front, but I think it's fine as the dark gray, black, and so I can find this appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
I agree with everything Commissioner Ginsburg said. Pretty unique and quirky little building. Very interesting to learn about its history. The presentation was quite clear. I find all the work appropriate. The bulkhead is somewhat visible, but given the great variety in the immediate context, as well as the way that it, clearly distinguished itself from the historic structure, I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, likewise here. It is a quirky little building, interesting. And I love the work that you're trying to restore some of the original elements. I can find it appropriate, even though some of the questions about the finish of the window in the front. But I think that given the context, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum? Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Cool.
Commissioner Chu?
Gosh, I'm going to be the outlier here. I think that bulkhead is too visible, and I don't like the way that I'm seeing the neighboring building with that obstruction in front of it. When I look at it on angle, it appears that there are many other options as demonstrated by the diagrams in the appendix. That's my issue here, is I would like the stair revised so that it's not so visible.
Thank you. Commissioner Ikumbe?
I find it appropriate. And as for the window color, I can go either way.
Thank you. And Commissioner Wilder?
Find appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to read the motion?
Yep. With regards to LPC-2608086, 2 East 78th Street, Upper East Side Historic District, a vernacular neo-federalist-style residence designed by Irving Margun and built in 1937 Application is to install windows and balcony in existing and modified openings, construct a rooftop bulkhead pergola, and legalize and modify alterations at the rear facade. I note that the building style, the scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed single-light casement windows at the ground floor at the East 78th Street facade will feature profiled brick mode and will be set behind historic ironwork. Therefore, the change in configuration and operation will not detract from the composition of the facade, that the proposed vertical expansion of the second floor window will provide the removal of only a small amount of plain brick and will remain within the inset panels of the decorative brickwork. That the proposed multi-light French doors will be in keeping with the multi-light windows at the third floor, thereby supporting a cohesive fenestration pattern. That the presence of Juliet balconies is consistent with buildings of this style and type within the historic district, and the simple design and dark finish of the ironwork will harmonize with the facade. That the three-story building is an anomaly on this block, and therefore it is nestled between two taller buildings and forward of the row house to the east. Therefore, the presence of the visible bulkhead will not overwhelm the building or its neighbors and will not further obscure views of the row house to the east. That the proposed rooftop bulkhead and pergola featuring simple forms and neutral cladding and finishes will be in keeping with typical rooftop accretions found on buildings in this historic district. That the placement of the stair bulkhead and pergola set back from the front and rear facades will retain a sense of the building's original scale and massing. That the mechanical enclosure will have a neutral finish and will be visible in the context of the other proposed additions at the roof. Therefore, it will not draw undue attention to itself. That the building is not part of a continuous row, therefore the previously installed multi-story curtain wall assembly at the rear facade did not disrupt a homogeneous relationship with adjacent buildings, and that the proposed new curtain wall assembly will be flush with the facade and will include spandrels at floor level to give scale and articulation to the facade.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Nay.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
That's been approved. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 26-08308. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1376, Lot 15, 680 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a neo-Georgian style apartment building designed by K.B. Norton and built in 1950 to 51. The application is to modify masonry openings and establish a master plan governing the installation of storefront infill, signage, and windows.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Lindsay Peterson. I'm from Higgins Quaisbarth and Partners. I'm joined today by Ward Dennis from my office, Vincent Jacobellis, who's representing Design Republic. They're the design architects, and Tyler Tannenbaum from TZ Capital, who are the owners of the retail condo. And I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to say a few introductory words.
Hello, Tyler Tannenbaum. Nice to meet you of TZ Capital. I really appreciate all of you and your time. TZ Capital acquired the retail condo in 2024, which is the first and second floor of this building. We were attracted by the first-class location and beautiful building and architecture and great tenants. We are a family office and family business and long-term holders who care deeply about being good stewards to the properties we own and keeping Madison Avenue a vibrant and special special part, and this building being a special part of Madison Avenue and one that is activated to the streetscape. However, over the years, it has become clear to us that the existing design does not fully meet our retailers' needs and desires. The first floor openings are small and do not provide adequate light and visibility into the retail spaces, and this has been a challenge since the space and building was converted in 2014. Similar issues exist at the second and third floor, where the replacement windows and unusual floor slab configurations create an awkward space. We have constantly heard from our retailers that they wish that they had larger windows and signage and more connectivity to the streetscape. This is consistent feedback we hear from our tenants and prospective tenants, and we would like to make our tenants as happy as possible. The new design you're about to see aims to unify the building base both aesthetically and functionally. It respects the historic design by recalling the historic details on the building. It'll provide the lighting and visibility that the retail spaces very much need to be successful and connect with its customers. These changes are critical to keeping this section of Madison Avenue viable as a retail destination long into the future. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Tyler. So today we are looking at the Carlton House. Not do that. Okay. Which is at 680 Madison Ave. It's located in the Upper East Side Historic District. It is situated on the west side of Madison Avenue between 61st and 62nd Street. It was constructed in 1950 to 1951 as a full block apartment hotel, and it was designed by Kenneth B. Norton in the Neo-Georgian style. So the proposal here before you today is for a storefront and window master plan covering all the retail portions of the base. So this is everything in the limestone section. And the proposal aims to, I'm always going to have this little thing there, provide a cohesive commercial character within the base, which is now all used as retail, though it was historically mixed use. Also to introduce a new infill design inspired by the building's historic details, and finally create a design that more closely relates to the types of commercial expressions you see along Madison Avenue within the historic district. This is an early rendering of the building by KB Norton. The building was actually conceived as the uptown successor of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, which around this time was slated for demolition. So it was meant to accommodate the permanent residents who were being evicted and also provide new jobs for former staff. And it was a pretty decorative post-war building for the time. So it has a 3-story limestone base, red brick above, and massing that terminates in a number of setbacks. And notably in this rendering, you can see that Norton initially envisioned much larger openings than what was ultimately built at the first floor. These are some early photos and an original elevation showing that the first floor is articulated flush against the street wall. You can sort of see that up here with modestly scaled openings that differed a little bit from the earlier rendering and have little relationship to the upper floors. The second and third floors are articulated with these recessed pavilions that start above the second floor and have chamfered corners. And then the elevations on the second and third floor have single and ganged openings with decorative spandrels. So while the first floor was used as retail, the second floor was actually used as a restaurant and cocktail space for the residents who did not have full kitchens on the upper floors. And the third floor was used as apartments originally. Here are some views showing the building at the time of designation versus today. So in 2011, there was a significant repositioning of the building with a design by Buyer Blinder Bell. This included significant modifications at the base, which was fully converted to retail use. The upper floors were converted from rental units to condos. New windows were installed throughout, and there was a rooftop addition and a lateral addition to the west. At the base, which as I said was entirely converted to retail, the whole first floor was rebuilt in limestone and raised to the bottom of the second floor sill. There were new storefront openings, new infill with awnings, And the main residential entrance was actually moved to the side street, although the original entrance surround and doors remained as part of the retail. On the second and third floor, the spandrels were replaced in fiberglass, and the windows were replaced with aluminum replacement windows. And at the interior, and I have a section later, you'll see that the slab was pulled back between the second and third floor, creating a double space height immediately behind the windows. And here are some existing conditions. So on the left, views of the first floor, which, as I said, is all non-historic. So that's black limestone at the base, black granite, limestone, stainless steel infill awnings, and then the fiberglass spandrels and the replacement windows above. And existing conditions are on the side streets, 61st and 62nd Street. And so here's sort of an overall view of the existing condition. And you can see that at the base, there's rather narrow openings with these awnings that limit visibility and engagement at the sidewalk level. And at the second and third floor, the replacement windows have a heavier profile that also reduces light into the interior. And despite this whole base now being used for retail, this is not entirely legible from the exterior. And so the proposal is to, at the first floor, remove those awnings, enlarge openings, and provide new infill, which will improve that connectivity to the street. It's only at the first floor that openings are being enlarged, and we have studied this, and I'll show this in a moment, but are keeping solidity at the flush corner pavilions and providing larger openings in the areas where the second and third floors recess back. So we feel these have less of a connection with those upper floors. And at the second and third floors, we are introducing new windows that have a lighter feel and also reflect the retail use within. And all of this will be detailed in a way that ties the three-story base together. We've looked at context on Madison Avenue, first off with the building right across the street from us, which was built around the same time. Notably, this one has much larger openings at its first floor. We've also looked at other full block apartment buildings on Madison Avenue, and you can see these often had larger openings at the first floor, and where the commercial uses extended into the upper part of the base, there is a clearer reading of commercial versus residential. And then looking even further up and down Madison Avenue, retail, you can see frequently extends into the upper floors of the base. And typically these have larger undivided glazing units, and the ground floor and upper floor commercial levels are read together. And the Commission has approved many retail projects on Madison Avenue that include enlarged openings, large areas of glazing, and we think that 828 Madison is a pretty comparable example. They combined single openings into larger openings at the second floor here on both elevations, and these have single lights in them. So while we're not proposing to alter the sizes of the upper floor openings, we are proposing a comparable single light infill approach. Here is an overall existing and proposed elevation. And zooming into the base, the design modifications are meant to respond to the building's organization. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two flush pavilions at either end and a flush pavilion in the middle with two intermediary recessed pavilions. And within each pavilion, the proposal reestablishes symmetry and reinforces the commercial identity within each section by placing the door in the middle. And here are some diagrams explaining that concept. So at the outer bays, the goal is to maintain that existing solidity, those piers, and we're not altering the size of those openings. At the center bay, the proposal requires a new ADA compliant door that'll be 5 feet wide. And so the other opening at the central section has been enlarged to maintain that symmetrical arrangement. At the intermediary bays that set back, we're introducing more glazing since these are more dissociated from the upper floors of the base, and creating symmetry around that storefront entrance. This composition, we think, recalls the symmetry of the original design, and it also recalls the larger opening seen in that early rendering that I showed you. And here's an existing and proposed floor plan, which I can come back to if we need to. And you can see there's a similar treatment at the side street elevations. This is 61st Street, and here is 62nd Street. And moving back to Madison Avenue, this is that central flush pavilion, which has the historic entry, which, as I mentioned, is now used for retail. And as I said, this is all non-historic infill, and the photo of the replacement windows and the fiberglass spandrels is in the top right. In the proposal, the historic entry is remaining, and in fact, the nickel doors and the nickel transom, which has this rather unique floral filigree border, has been the design inspiration for the proposal. This is, in fact, the one remaining historic feature at the entire first floor, this entry. And so the proposal is to use this nickel finished metal across all 3 levels, replicate that border detail at the 2nd and 3rd floor windows, which will provide a level of texture at those levels. And we think that this will help unify the base as a cohesive commercial composition. The proposal also includes recreating the spandrel panels in metal, which is what they were originally. So we think this will bring it closer back to the historic condition, and the goal would be to improve the proportions and the detailing of the spandrels. The 2nd and 3rd floor window scope is being driven in large part, as I mentioned at the beginning, to this somewhat awkward double height interior condition. So as part of the 2011 project, the interior 1st floor slab got pushed up to allow a higher head height at the 1st floor, creating this single height space behind the 2nd and 3rd floor windows at the new 2nd floor. And you can see your head height basically hits the back of the spandrel. So we think the new windows will really provide better visibility both in and out of that space. And these drawings also show the removal of the awnings and the installation of new pin-mounted signage in the sign band above the openings. And here is a typical detail through a window. And here's a detail through the upper floor windows in the recess section. And this is a section through those flush outer bays through a door. The door signage will be slightly taller. And another thing to point out here is we are proposing backlit signage at the drop soffit at the what we'll read as the 3rd floor. That'll be 2 feet back from the glazing. And similarly, here's some details of that door change and the upper floors. And we have a new exterior sign program that includes pin-mounted signage in the limestone band above the openings. The signage size will depend on whether it is an entry opening or a window opening. There will also be dimensional letter or decal signage at the bottom of the show windows, and mid-height signage in select locations, either plaques or pin-mounted. And there will be additional signage at the side streets. So to recap, this new design is really meant to unify this commercial base by drawing from historic materials and detailing seen at the building. And the key features include the new windows with the decorative border, the new spandrels that will be closer to the original condition than they are now, And notably, all of this work is being done in areas of non-historic fabric. And the new design also respects the building organization. So where the sizes of the openings are being changed, as I said, we're trying to maintain the solidity at the flush sections and create the larger openings in the recessed areas. And here's a rendering, again, showing the entire building. I think it shows that the base still functions as the visual grounding of the building. You still have the horizontal lines, which give it a sense of weight. But importantly, all these changes allow the base to express its current retail use, and we think more closely relate to the other types of commercial bases you see on Madison Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg?
You're removing the canopies, which are fairly typical in Madison Avenue Historic District, and also provide a location for signage that doesn't affect the facade. What is the logic behind removing the canopies?
You mean the awnings?
Awnings, sorry, yes.
I think removing the awnings is about providing visibility into the storefronts. I think that there are lots of buildings that do have them, but others on Madison, I don't think it's
Right.
fully-
Although they're above the eye level, so in one sense, it's more the amount of light getting in, I think. But anyway, thank you.
I have a question. I understand that this is a master plan, but I think that if you work on like one part of the building, and then wait for another tenant to move out and then work on another part of the building, there might be a little bit of mismatch. Do you have any sense of timing as to when this would occur?
Yeah, so there's currently some very long leases that the owner is waiting for them to come up. I think work at the earliest would begin in the early 2030s, but the owner's goal is to complete it, in as short a period of time as possible. They don't want it to all look mismatched as well.
So it would be, as the tenant moves out, then that part of it would be taken care of. Is there any part of this that would occur earlier that you think on the second, third floor, or the first floor?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask, given the leases, how long will it take for it to be fully completed?
I think I need to discuss this with the owner, but I think that there is a time frame that, would you like to add something? Okay. I think once work starts, the owner thinks that they can complete all the work in 10 years, if that.
So the entire building, or the entire 3 floors would be,
Right, but that time frame would have to start from when the leases were actually up.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
In your building, the recessed areas where you say on the street level, you're going to put larger windows. And if you look at the background, the recessed area, the elevations are different from the elevation in the front. Is there any reason why you have so many columns or pilasters in the front facade?
I'm not sure I'm following.
You see where you have the
Yeah,
recessed
maybe let me go back to an elevation and you can. The plan, okay.
You see the
Vincent
difference between-
Icabellis representing Design Republic. Can you repeat the question regarding?
Okay, so
column
you have
placement?
the concept of this, you have A, B, you have center and 2 corners, right? And you're keeping those exactly the same. You're keeping those exactly the same. Then you have these recess areas, these 2 recess areas that you say that you're going to put the larger windows in, correct?
Correct.
But then there's these white columns coming down that are different in scale from the recess areas. And I'm wondering, why not just make it all glass instead of putting all those columns in where the doorways are, you see?
Right. So if you refer to the existing condition that exists today versus the proposed, if you look at the rhythm of the placement, there is an association with the upper facade.
And if you notice that the openings really are not changing. So the widths of 4 feet are maintained. The widths of 3.5 feet are maintained. It's 4 sections that are enlarged from approximately 8'10" to 11'9", and it's limited to those inner windows that are disassociated from the upper facade.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and move to public testimony. We have somebody signed up to speak. Matthew Bauer, please come to the podium and state your name. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Matt Bauer. I'm served the president of the Madison Avenue Bid since 1999. So I had the privilege of participating in the discussions and developing the Madison Avenue storefront master plan in early 2000. The Madison Avenue Bid supports a certificate of appropriateness application for 680 Madison Avenue, as the proposed design is consistent with and advances the spirit of the yellow category provisions of the Madison Avenue storefront master plan, which call for a unified appearance across multiple separate storefronts within a single building. The proposed improvements will aid in retail visibility for the 6 stores within the building, while still maintaining the appearance of 680 Madison as a cohesive, uniform unit. The design also creates greater connectivity between the ground floor and upper floor retail spaces, an important feature as many of the stores in the building operate on multiple levels between the distinct commercial base of the structure. Importantly, the horizontal sign band across the entire facade strengthens the pedestrian-friendly scale of the ground floor. We appreciate the opportunity to testify and just want to say how much we appreciate the work of the Landmarks Preservation Commission in providing stewardship to Madison Avenue as one of the world's great shopping and hospitality destinations. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, let me turn it over to Stephen Thompson for remote testimony.
Zoom participants wishing to testify, please raise your hand. The first speaker will be Historic Districts Council.
Hello, my name is Emma Bartley, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal inappropriate, as it would significantly compromise the building's carefully balanced composition. HDC objects to the proposed enlargement of the ground floor masonry openings. The existing storefront level provides a strong, substantial base, and increasing the amount of glazing would erode that effect. Similarly, the second and third floor windows are integral to the building's overall design, and we do not find the proposed interventions to be necessary or appropriate. Any work should instead take a more restorative approach. We had also questioned the necessity of removing the existing awnings and find that the introduction of pin-mounted signage introduces visual clutter to the facade. Thank you.
Zeynep Turan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Zeynep Turan, speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends objects to this master plan application as it significantly compromises the historical configuration of the building's retail base and its cohesive neo-Georgian character. The proposed masonry openings at the retail floor introduce an excessive degree of glazing, fundamentally altering the base's solid to void pattern in favor of too much void. The 2013 alteration already expanded street level glazing by raising the second floor slab. This proposal compounds that intervention. The result further erodes the historic rhythm of that defines the building's base. The replacement of casement windows on the second and third floors with single pane units creates a visual disconnect that undermines Kenneth Norton's cohesive Neo-Georgian design, as the proposed units fail to relate to the prevailing casement fenestration across the rest of the facade. This change separates the base from the upper floors and contradicts the building's original architectural intent by removing significant character-defining features of the mid-century structure. The committee also questions the necessity of replacing historical spandrels with replicated nickel units and wonders why the original material cannot be maintained. While Friends does not typically oppose the removal of Madison Avenue awnings, we are concerned by the proposal to eliminate them across the full block from 61st to 62nd Street. Removing these features over such a broad frontage at a time of intensifying urban heat island effects would reduce passive solar shading, increasing cooling loads. Several committee members consider the loss of this shading to be environmentally responsible. For these reasons, Friends urges the Commission to deny this application in order to protect the Carlton House's distinctive character. We ask the applicant to develop a revised design that minimizes the removal of limestone, historic spandrel panels, and original window fabric while improving energy performance without compromising the architectural integrity of the facade. Thank you, Commissioners.
Anyone else joining via Zoom who wishes to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends denial, citing that the proposed master plan will lose the texture of the original and current glazing and has a contemporary character that doesn't integrate with the overall design of the building.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to some of the comments?
I will just reiterate off the bat that we are not removing any historic fabric. The spandrels are fiberglass, non-historic, and the proposal is to replace them with metal and something with more refined detail. As far as the openings being too big at the base, I'll just reinforce what Vincent said, which is that the largest width is 810, and we're increasing that by a little less than 3 feet. So we think this is a modest enlargement in select locations. In terms of the second and third floor windows and the visual connection, historically those windows were aligned with the residential uses within, and now they're aligned with the retail uses within. So we believe this update appropriately expresses or reflects this adaptive reuse. And finally, I'll just say with regard to the awnings that the new infill will be energy efficient and will meet all those requirements for building performance.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Commissioner Mahan?
I have a question, I think, for Corey and Mark. So I understand that this building is within strict master plan for storefronts in the Upper East Side Historic District, and I suspect there are elements of the design that bring it to the commission and you know, that are sort of beyond staff level review, but I gather it is additionally the fact that the entirety of a single level would not be done all at one time. The master plan requires that for staff level review. Do I understand that correctly, and how might we balance that? You know, it's not unreasonable that as tenants turn over, how do we balance that with the design changes put in front of us?
Try to answer that. I think there's a couple of questions in there.
Yes.
I think most importantly, I think most master plans that the staff ends up reviewing and approving are not for sort of like major or even modest modifications to masonry openings or sort of facade alterations in that way. It's more for things like repetitive work types of window replacement or signage installations or awnings, things of that nature, unless it was actually restoring a historic condition, and then staff might issue a permit. And if they did, you know, generally speaking, master plans don't have an expiration date, and that could occur incrementally over a long period of time. In this case, they're not restoring, you know, they're modifying from the existing condition, which itself is not the original condition because the commission's previously approved work here at these storefronts, at least with regard to the ground floor. So it would never qualify for a staff permit. So I think that your comfort level or lack thereof of this occurring over time, I think is something to be discussed here, although I do believe we have in the past allowed such master plans. I'm not sure if the same questions were asked at those times, you know, like, you know, what does it mean that this may not happen at all, or not even starting for 5 years from now and then take 10 more years? So I think that's something to discuss fresh now. But like I said, I think there is precedent for this type of approval. And also you can judge for yourself, but the types of changes that are being proposed, maybe there isn't a consistent look for that intermittent period of time, but it may be that they're subtle enough or in keeping enough with what would remain that it's okay and the building can sort of handle that change that does happen more slowly. Thank you. Very helpful.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Wilder, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Kumbe, would you second that?
Second.
Thanks. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. So the proposal is essentially trying to express a vision of retail and openness and transparency in the lower podium of the building. And I guess the case is that the existing building design originally had housing in the upper portions, therefore reflecting a new use down here. I think as an overall concept, I think that's appropriate. The podium in its materiality and stone cohesion do represent a unified piece of the base of the building. When I look at the difference in elevations and understanding that there was a renovation prior as well, I do find that the ground floor openings as they are now are a bit hard to read in terms of their relationship to the upper floors. What's being revised does increase the opening sizes. I think Everardo pointed this out before, asking for the logic. This is not a straight-on elevation. It's somewhat perspectival, so it's not the easiest to read. But it looks like it's trying to make some sense of organization of proud bays and then the recess and those being center-lined. I can see that overall. My issue here is about the amount of stone. It is reduced quite a bit from before. And that combined with what I sense, and there was also a slide about signage that I want to talk about. But if I look at the overall, if I look at the overall facade, I think the first question is this an appropriate change to the facade in terms of the podium's relationship to the housing piece above? I think that a greater deal of glazing for me is appropriate. What I find a bit lacking is there seems to be a sense of detail and scale. Personally, I could imagine retaining the verticals that reemphasize the three tripartite breakup of those windows, which the existing, I guess, the new spandrel conditions that are to replicate the historic conditions strongly still retain, is that three breakdown. I believe that this could be revised if there was brought some of those verticals back into that second, third floor. I feel that it would retain more of the texture and depth and facade rhythm that the existing condition or historic condition has. I would be open to that in between as opposed to forcing all the divisions and multi-light that are in the historic condition. I could see some transition there. But big openings as they are now, I do feel a bit too contrasting for the highly articulated openings of the windows above. The other comment that I have is I find that although in this rendering the signage is somewhat minimized, I'm worried about that really becoming a messy condition on the facade. The horizontal, I think, is a very important aspect to this building right now in the podium, and that's the one continuous line that unifies this podium above the ground floor. It is already relatively small. I think the signage needs to be within the opening of the big window below it. It's big enough. It could take a more standardized approach to signage up at the top without in my mind, marring that important stone horizontal there that could and will have a huge variety of style, font, potentially color. I think it needs that clean facade masonry to exist. Other thoughts? The removal of the awnings, I think, do provide a nice sense of human scale and street frontage. The client here proposes to remove them. I could be okay with that, but again, I think that the signage could live within the masonry opening and should not be on the masonry above it. And those are my comments.
I mean, I just want to note one thing with regard to the awnings. They're not historic elements in their own right, so staff would be able to issue a permit to remove them at any time. Similarly, they could issue a permit to put them back, but not something that's before you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kumbe?
Yes, overall, I find the application to be very interesting. As it points out to specific details, which I think is a good thing. But I'm having a harder time trying to grasp just some of the basic items. One thing to start at the base itself, it is very open, and the building is a massive building and it sits on top of it. So looking more for a larger sense of grounding to the ground floor, even though it is used for commercial space, and I can understand the necessity for glazing. The two recessed bays, I believe those bays have been widened a little too wide. And I think that will help a little bit more with the grounding itself. Once we go to these like pavilion-like corners and the expansive glass with the spandrel across, it does give it a different type of reading. And it does bring more attention to the second and third floor itself. And I don't really read it as a continual base as much. It's a play with the proportions, and that's how I'm reading it now. And I do understand that there is backlit signage that was going to be behind some of them. And I can see that being the cost for maybe opening up that glass, but I do believe they do need to be separated and to actually match with the building that is above. I guess also, even with the large glazing, the floors were changed. And when I look at the section, it looks like I'm looking directly at the spandrel itself. So I don't really see what's the importance of maintaining that large space. So maybe that might be okay to actually separate that glazing into the tripartite area. And I think that will help bring some of the cohesion with the facade back. And I guess I also share the sentiment of the having the pin signage across the stone. It may be problematic, and as it was said once before, it may cause clutter, and it may give a sign of disorganization.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the previous comments. I understand, and I think it is appropriate to enlarge some of the storefront openings. However, it feels like it's no longer serving the purpose of the base or this area of the building, and it feels like it's separating somewhat from the upper portions of the building, and that could be for a few reasons. Some that have been stated before: the loss of those vertical elements in the large window openings at the second and third floors, and also in those two recessed bays, the windows at the storefront on the ground floor. I think it's looking at the perspective rendering as well as looking at the elevations, it does cause a little confusion. at the rendering, it doesn't feel like they relate well enough, to me at least. On the ground floor, I can understand it a little better, but it's still not as strong as I think it should be, especially when you compare it to the other bays that are not recessed. And so I have a little trouble with the enlarged openings because of that, not necessarily because they're enlarged, but because of their relation to the upper floors. And then I think as well as the I agree that horizontal band is needs to be as maintained, and I think the signage does take away from that. So yeah, those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
So in general, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I want to just talk about signage because there seem to me two options. One is the signage is lowered and put in or behind the glass, or two, you keep the awnings and the signage is on the awnings. And I think, although I might prefer the awnings, I think both are acceptable, but I think that needs to be studied. And they should come back with one that doesn't have all the pin signage in the stone.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
Pretty, it's kind of a funny building in a way, built post-war and sort of in the you know, light historicist style. The base has been altered already, not insignificantly. That being said, I think the sort of intent, the aspiration of the project to clarify alignment of the internal use with the architectural expression is a good one. And I support that. I support, in a general sense, creating greater glazing to improve, the retail, success of the retail, let's say. In fact, I think the rhythm of the ground floor openings is improved. It's a bit busy and fussy, lacking in relationship to what's above as it exists now. So in general, I'm okay with the enlarged openings, particularly ground floor. With regards to signage, I do think there's too much pin letters. I could live with some pin mounted letters in that spandrel portion above the openings, or none, if the applicant wanted to come back and propose that they're all, living within the windows, that would be okay too. But I think what's proposed is simply too much and degrades the sort of sense of clarity and rhythm that they're trying to bring to the ground floor. Up at the second floor, I think the replacement of the non-original spandrels with new Alex spandrels and detail, I think actually would be a significant improvement. And I think that would balance the greater openness of sort of single light windows above and below that decorative spandrel. So I would be okay with those. If the applicant wanted to come back with some additional verticals there, I would of course be okay with that as well. And then I do think we ought to touch here on the issue of happening over time. And I think the materials are compatible. If one retail unit were changed and others remained for some period, that might be okay. I think it's pretty reasonable to do this work as tenants come up, and that may happen over a period of time. That's the nature of a master plan. I would be okay with that. So I'm really generally supportive, with the exception of some comments about the signage.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, much has been talked about the issue with the signage, and I think a number of commissioners have made some good alternate suggestions, and it really depends on what the applicant wants to do in the proposal. I think that what's just been mentioned about the phasing is obviously the key issue here. We sympathize with the existing leases, and therefore, the uniformity or the unity of over time for the next decade, what this will look like. And that's my main concern at this moment, obviously, is what would this look like as we walk on Madison Avenue, such an elegant place. And the other thing I would note is obviously what Frank touched on the spandrel, the metal panel on the between second and third floor. The thing that gives this the base a strong look is obviously the horizontal line. And I'm just wondering whether there's a possibility of unifying that across between the second and third floor, sort of giving it more unity. But I do agree with a lot of the comments with some of the commissioners that the pin mounted is way too much, and I think really need to find a better solution.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thanks. I agree with a lot of the conversation to date. I think on the first floor, I totally agree with Stephen about Stephen Chu about the signage. I think a rail system, maybe using it, the finish is a good suggestion that we've seen in other locations, that to go in front of the glass, to unify it, but allow some change. There's also, they did mention decals in the windows, but they didn't really show a whole lot of it. So that's another way that you can modulate the signage and try to bring it down to the pedestrian level without having it clutter up the stonework. And in terms of Darius and Stephen Wilder, we're talking about the cluttery or the rhythm quality of the infill glazing. I agree with that, and my take on that is, I think that what's giving it that unsettling quality is the irregularity of the spacing. What you have is like on the pavilions, you have an ABA, right? You have a narrow, wide, narrow. Then in the infill, you have like a ABCBA, and the A of the infill is very similar to the A of the pavilion. And so what it's doing is it's kind of eliding the solider part into the less solid part. And I think if you looked back at the original rendering, the infills were much more regular. The kind of the open storefront areas, they had a simpler look. And I think that was a more successful way to achieve what you're saying you want to achieve, which is an area of open balanced with an area of less open. So I would say look back at those original renderings and try to regularize those more glazed areas so that it's not as staccato, perhaps. In terms of the second and third floors, I think that the way I see those big double height windows with the metal panel infill, which I think is going to be a real improvement with the added detail as well, I see those as kind of pulling up the storefront into the upper portion. And the part of the scale problem that bothers me is not those big windows, but it's the rest. It's the single windows that are framed by the stone, and then the bay windows at the corner. Those are much more distinctively residential in scale, and that scale is not changing in the proposal. And so if I were to make a suggestion about adding texture and scale, I'd want to bring the upper building down in those areas. Let the storefront come up in the big windows, but have the texture of the upper floors come down into the residential scale come down in those single windows, the single pane windows, and the bay windows. Most importantly, use muntins there to bring that texture down.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
So, conceptually, you have this ground floor base, and I wanted to have more openings, and I think that works really well. I think the horizontal band works well. Where I think it falls apart for me is the recess area. The two recess areas are just two large windows placed. That's where they need a bit more decoration, more substance. If you look at the existing, at where it's recessed, it's kind of filled with elements, materiality. I think if you took those recess areas and added maybe more mullions to the window, broke it up more, make it more denser looking, feeling, then you would have, A, and then you would have the pavilions, and the background building would add a separate element. So it would be more cohesive rather than seeing those two large windows there that don't relate in any way to the base, the front, or to the three major elements.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, thank you. So I think we're going to take no action today, but I think you heard some of the concerns that the commissioners have. And we'll let you work with staff to address some of those concerns and bring you back. Thank you.
All right. And we'll go ahead and break for lunch now. We are behind schedule, so the next hearing item that would have been presented now will be first after lunch. And I'll also be noting an item that we're going to not present later this afternoon and instead will be read into the record. Let me just note that quickly now in case anyone was waiting for that item. That was public hearing item number 6, LPC 26-06719, 61 West 90th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. Again, I'm reading that into the record now. It will not be presented today. We'll bring it back at a future public hearing date, and we'll have the presentation and take testimony at that time. But in case anyone is here today in the audience that wanted to testify on that item, it is early, but we'll ask. Seeing there's none, I'll ask Stephen Thompson if we have anyone on Zoom that might be here for that particular item. 61 West 90th Street, item, public hearing item number 6, which would have been scheduled for 1:55 p.m.
Are there any Zoom participants who were seeking to testify for this item? I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. And we'll check again later this afternoon in case someone joins later, but again, not to be read today.
Okay. So this concludes our morning session. We're going to break for lunch. It is 1:09 now, and we'll return at 1:40 to resume the afternoon session. We ask all members of the public on Zoom to voluntarily exit at this time so that you don't experience technical difficulties returning to the afternoon session that can arise if we have to remove you from the meeting. Thank you.